Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for May 14th to order. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to start off by reading three proclamations, and then we'll get into the business at hand. Let's see, Chief, if you want to come up, and Commander.
Major.
Peace Officers Memorial Day. Whereas the police officers of Ames have worked devotedly and selflessly on behalf of the people of this community, regardless of the peril or hazard to themselves. And whereas these officers have safeguarded the rights and freedoms of all in Ames. And whereas it's important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their police officers, and that officers recognize their duty to serve the people of this community by protecting them against violence and disorder, by safeguarding life and property, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas these men and women, by their patriotic service and their dedicated efforts, have earned the gratitude of the city of Ames. And whereas the service and sacrifice of Ames Police Sergeant Howard Snyder is eternally honored at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and the Iowa Peace Officer Memorial. Therefore, I, John A. Haley, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby recognize May 15th, 2024 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of the federal, state, and municipal officers who have been killed or disabled in the line of duty. This is done in recognition of the service given by the men and women who, night and day, stand guard in our midst to protect us through enforcement of our laws. I invite Chief Huff if he wants to say a few words.
Got just a few.
Oh, no, you can't do
that. I wrote them down so I wouldn't miss anything. So first, I want to thank the mayor and city council for recognizing National Police Week 2024 through this proclamation. Just this morning, we swore in 2 new police officers, and it's been a while since we've been able to do this. We're still short 5 police officer positions, so if you know anybody that's looking for a job, send them our way. It's easy to lose sight of what's important. Last night, I watched the 36th annual Police Officer Memorial Candlelight Vigil. During the vigil, 282 names were read and added to the wall. That's a lot. That is 282 law enforcement professionals who gave their lives in service to others. Ames PD obviously has a name on that wall. Sergeant Howard James Snyder, whose end of watch was June 17th, 2012. This is actually a tracing of his name on the wall in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, another name from Iowa was also added this year. If you've never watched this ceremony, I encourage you to do so, and you can find it online at nleomf.org, National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund.org. Since the events of 2020, policing has changed. We've become more transparent, increased our outreach and engagement efforts, updated policies, and added RPAC, just to name a few. The other result, unfortunately, is there are fewer people willing to do this job these days. Police officers are asked to do a lot, probably more than they should. They are marriage, mental health, substance abuse counselors. They do social work, act as your parent, give advice, and yes, they even occasionally enforce a few laws. They pledge to keep us safe, even when they are not. They run towards danger. They kiss their loved ones before they go to work in the hopes that it's not the last time. Policing is tough on families, and we appreciate their love and support. It's important that we all support them so we can continue to attract the best and the brightest they have to offer to be Ames police officers. Again, I want to thank the mayor and council for their support and every member of the Ames Police Department for their service. Please be safe.
All right, next I invite John Joyner to join me up here? National Public Works Week. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to be sustainable and resilient communities, supporting public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Ames. And whereas it is in the public interest for the residents, civic leaders, and children in the United States to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest in the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th annual National Public Works Week, the theme of advancing quality of life for all highlights the positive impacts that collaboration between residents and public works employees can have on building strong communities. Therefore, I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby designate the week of May 19th through 25th, 2024 as National Public Works Week. I urge all residents to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies and activities, events, ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and advancing the quality of life for all. It's my pleasure to introduce our Director of Public Works, John Joyner. I think you want to offer a few comments, John?
Sure. Thank you, as always, I want to thank the mayor, council, and the city manager's office for the direction and the support throughout the year. And I also want to thank all the public works employees for their hard work, their dedication, and the long hours that they put into this job, often at the detriment of time and experiences with their family, and all they do to make this a wonderful community. So thanks to all.
And Jamie, you want to join me up here? Good to see you. Poppy Days. Whereas the month of May is time for remembering, and whereas the American Legion Auxiliary traditionally distributes poppies for aid to disabled veterans during that month, and whereas distribution of these poppies is handled entirely by volunteer workers serving without pay, and whereas every penny received from the program goes directly for aid to disabled veterans or members of their families, and whereas most of the poppy funds remain in the local community, and whereas local American Legion Auxiliary number 37 has responsibility for making Poppy Days a success here in Ames. Therefore, I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim May 24th and May 25th, 2024 as Poppy Days. This is a time when all citizens will have opportunities by their donations to honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice and assisted the living. It's my pleasure to introduce Jamie Barker, the president of the Ames American Legion Auxiliary, and you're welcome to say a few things, a few words.
Well, it sure has been a hard act to follow. Thank you so much for having me today. And for designating these Poppy Days. I did want to reiterate that some of the projects that we do with Poppy funds might be interested to hear. So one of the things we've done is the Iowa Veterans Home. We've bought seat cushions for some of the people that are in wheelchairs. We also support Puppy Jake. You might be a little more familiar with that, where they train service dogs for our military. So those are just a couple of the projects that we do. And I would also like to thank Mayor Hala for having us tonight and for the City Council for acknowledging these days. Thank you, and we hope to see you out there.
Well, at Councilman Garton's request, we'll recognize a birthday girl apparently in the audience. We won't sing happy birthday to her, but on behalf of the city council. And can I wear your crown today? No? Okay, all right. Happy birthday. All right, we'll move on to our agenda, and at the request of staff, council, item number 55 is going to be to be pulled from the agenda. That will come back to council at a future council meeting. Item 56 will remain on the agenda. So with that, we'll move on to consent agenda. Does any council member wish to pull any item from consent?
Mayor, item 17, which is one I'd like to visit with staff about, and 46 and 47.
All right, anyone wish to pull any other item? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve consent, less item number 15, 17, 46, and 47.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All right. Item 15, Tim?
This is a request from the Patriotic Council for the Memorial Day Parade. I serve on the Ames Patriotic Council, and I have a conflict of interest on this.
All right. Entertain a motion to approve the request from Ames Patriotic Council on item number 15, A through E.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Abstain, conflict of interest.
Aye. 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 Aye.
All right, number 17.
And I think Pa's available to speak on this. Amendment to the 23-24 asset contract with the Salvation Army to add $40,000 for temporary emergency shelter services. I guess maybe two questions. Could you give us just a quick overview of what this is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pa Van Goldbeck, Assistant City Manager. So back in 2000, for this fiscal year, 2023 to 24, of the asset allocations, 181,650 was set aside, and that was approved by council. That was set aside specifically for emergency shelter services. We went out and did a request for proposal, did not award a bid, and so that this funding is not new. It's already part of the original allocation. And so of that 181,650, the Salvation Army has asked for 40,000 to be able to provide that service. And so that's what the request is for you today.
And I appreciate that.
Yep.
And so the reason I pulled this was just to provide clarity that we're not adding additional funding for temporary emergency services. These are pre-approved dollars. Clarify that.
Thank you. Is there a motion on item 17?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye. 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 Aye.
Aye.
All right, item 46.
46 and 47, I have a conflict of interest because of Habitat for Humanity, and so I can't participate.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion approving item 46 and 47?
So moved. Second.
All right, thank you. Roll call.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Abstain, conflict.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public forum. It's time we set aside on the agenda for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. No comment, no action will be taken, and ask people would limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Richard, you want to start us off tonight?
I kind of feel this has more to do with the Ames School District than the City Council, but you're both elected officials, and it's like they've been giving me a little bit of a runaround to this idea that I have. And I would have gone, I was under the impression that their meeting was yesterday, but it turned out it was a week ago yesterday. And so it's like I'm probably going to try to read something to them, but I also sort of wanted to read it. They're very exact about 3 minutes and being able to talk. And it's like I tried to read this to my caseworker, and she said it was basically I got as far as 2 minutes, and it's like I hadn't even got past the second page. I hadn't even written it on the page. It was just off the top of my
Well,
head.
Richard, if this is related to the school district, we don't really have any jurisdiction over that.
Well, it has a little bit to do with government just generally. You know, I mean, the soldiers in Iraq were greeted by a bunch of this town brought thick bundles of $100 bills. They poured it right in front of American GIs. Then
All
they
right,
poured
if you
gasoline
want,
on it.
I'll give you 3 minutes to go ahead, Richard, unless I find or determine that it's just really not if it's out of line. So if you want to proceed. Go ahead.
Well, they were all these American soldiers are all dressed in riot gear, and the American intelligence expected there to be a riot because they wanted all the money that they had gotten from all the oil, and they burned it. And then an Iraqi got up and said, "Do you love anyone in Iraq? Do you love anyone in America? Do you love anyone? Do you love yourselves? Do you love your paychecks? Did somebody pay you apes to come to our town to make yourselves look like a public nuisance? We love you Americans. It's America's God. We don't give a damn for. Are you guys God?"
Richard, this really doesn't seem to be
it
applicable to City of Ames. If you have something that you want to share that affects City of Ames, I'd be happy to listen to it.
Is the president?
Thank you. So anybody else who wants to address council on under public forum, items that are not on the city agenda? If not, we'll close public forum and move on to item number 49, agreements with Iowa State University for SciTown.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You'll recall that on March 12th, we brought to you 2 agreements for your initial review related to SciTown. One was an agreement that facilitated the financing of improvements to the Iowa State Center using revenues collected through the SciTown development to do so. The second was an agreement related to utilities, traffic control, and other supporting services for the SciTown area. At that time, the council instructed staff to work towards 2 modifications to those agreements with Iowa State. One was a minor modification related to how designees might be appointed to an advisory committee that's outlined in one of the agreements. And we've incorporated some language into the agreement that accomplishes that. The second instruction was to address what might happen to pilot funds if the university was to demolish one of the original 4 Iowa State Center buildings. I want to emphasize that we, as city staff, have not heard any specific proposal to do such a thing, to demolish or close an Iowa State Center building. I think the concern was simply a question of what would happen in the event that a building was demolished, right? So staff discussed this with ISU. The agreement that exists for the pilot would obligate ISU to continue using the MOU pilot revenues that are collected for improvements to the remaining buildings, the remaining 4 buildings, for the specific purposes that are outlined in the agreement. ISU has agreed, and we've incorporated language into the MOU, that if demolition was something that they considered, that before Iowa State was to go through with such an action, the advisory committee for SciTown, which includes a university representative, would appear before the city council in a public meeting where that group would explain why a demolition of a building was being proposed. So that provides an opportunity for there to be public input, questions from the city council about this action, whether there are alternatives, what led up to such a proposal in the first place. So we've incorporated language that accomplishes those things. Iowa State staff has given us an indication that they support that kind of language being in the agreement. Now, we told you at the last meeting where we discussed SciTown that easements for the utilities that are going to be provided to SciTown, easements are another matter that needed to be resolved before we could come back to you. ISU staff and city staff have agreed to some easement language that allows the city's water, sewer, and electrical infrastructure to be placed in the SciTown area and serve the new buildings in a manner that meets ISU's needs and also protects the city's interests and the utilities' interests with regard to matters such as relocation and incompatible structures. So we're comfortable as city staff with the language that's proposed in the easements that are attached as part of the SciTown item tonight. There are four minor issues that I want to make sure are very clear before the council moves forward. So one is that approving these agreements tonight does not grant SciTown an exemption from property taxation. Declining to approve these agreements would not render SciTown taxable. The agreements are intended to describe how funds collected from SciTown would be put towards specific purposes, either towards paying back the investments in the infrastructure and so forth in the SciTown area, or in the case of the MOU pilot, going towards capital improvements for the arts and cultural facilities of the Iowa State Center. Taxability and whether a property is taxable or not, that's a matter that's decided by the assessor using guidance provided by the Iowa Department of Revenue in interpreting Iowa code. So these agreements do not establish that SciTown is taxable or not taxable. We do not have that authority. Another matter that I want to make sure is clear is about sales taxes. I think a question came up about, particularly around the university bookstore, right? Being able to make sales that are not subject to sales tax, and a concern about that and the impact that that might have on other businesses that aren't able to make sales that are non-taxable. So the exemption that the university bookstore has from sales tax is based on the fact that the university bookstore itself is a tax exempt entity and that the profit that's made on the sales are going towards educational, charitable, or religious use. That's the set of three potential uses for the funds. So so long as those criteria are met, the sale is tax exempt. So if Iowa State was to build a branch of the university bookstore in SciTown, the sales at that location would be tax exempt. If a private sector for-profit apparel store located in SciTown, those sales would be taxable. So it's not a matter of where the sale occurs, it's a matter of what is the purpose of the sale and the nature of the sale and by whom. So that's the clarification about sales tax. Hotel motel taxes are a different subset of Iowa code. So it's our understanding that a hotel would be obligated to collect the local hotel motel tax rate. That's the situation that occurs with the University of Iowa at the Iowa Memorial Union Hotel. They collect the Iowa City local hotel motel tax rate on stays in that facility. So if a hotel was to be built at SciTown, we would expect the same to occur. That's our understanding. And then the fourth item relates to the Sheeman building. So there are some improvements that were announced some time ago and are in a stage of progress. Those improvements were made based on decisions that predated the completion of these agreements that are in front of you tonight. It's our understanding that athletics funds are being used to finance these improvements, not money that would come out of the pilot arrangement that's discussed in the agreements. We also understand that those improved areas in the Sheeman building, even though they're being financed by athletics, they're not to be used exclusively by athletics. So they would be used presumably at some athletic events, but for the rest of the time, they'd be available for functions that events, programming, things of that nature that are not athletic related. So Those are some brief updates since the last time we spoke about SciTown. We've provided you again some analysis about what the agreements accomplish, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Brian. Questions?
Brian, I've received some questions about whether any of the pilot funds that are being collected are going to be used for developing SciTown. Could you speak to that?
So the the pilot funds, pilot is a large pot, right? So it'll consist of the taxable amount that would be collected in a similar private sector development based on the value of the land and the buildings, and the city's adopted tax rate and the adopted tax rates of all of the other taxing entities. The portion of each building that relates to the building value and the taxable or the tax rate that the city tax rate is, that's the portion that would go towards the MOU pilot as an investment towards paying for arts improvements in the Iowa State Center facilities. All of the other portion of the pilot that's collected, so the amount that's based on the land value and the city's tax rate and the building and land value applied against all of the other taxing authorities' rates, that goes into the operating fund for SciTown, and ISU can use that for the expenses to operate SciTown, for common area maintenance, development expenses, construction costs, for the buildings that are being built within SciTown, paying back the investments in the infrastructure that's going in the ground right now, and for other common area improvements, and then for potentially developer rebates, depending on how they structure their agreement with their developer. So it will go towards, it will be invested in some manner back into SciTown itself. It's not as if that money can be collected and then used for some unrelated university purpose elsewhere on campus. It would be invested into the SciTown area to the obligations that the university has incurred there.
In fact, you want to explain the provision if they try to use money, that remainder pilot, for purposes outside of SciTown, what does the agreement specify?
So I would argue that there's a list of allowed expenses, right? And it points towards putting that money back into SciTown. But just in the event that somehow there's an argument that money can be taken out of SciTown and put towards some unrelated university purpose, then the city has the option to take an equivalent amount out of the MOU pilot that's collected. And we can then take that and put that into the general fund or whatever lawful government purpose the city council decides to put that money towards. So we're both, the university and the city, bound to invest that money into SciTown and into the arts facilities. And if the university reneges on that deal and puts money someplace else, then the city has the option to do the same.
And I'd like to dovetail, I appreciate Gloria's question. And for those who are watching, we're using the term pilot. And if you've never heard that term, I try to make sure we clarify these things. So that's the payment in lieu of taxes. So when we talk about pilot, those are those dollars. And to Gloria's point, there's an element of good faith that is, we can't possibly contract every aspect of this relationship. But how would we verify that the pilot funds are being used for their intended purpose?
So in the agreement, there's an obligation for Iowa State to provide the city annual audited financial statements, statements of where the money was spent, what money was collected and from what sources, and in what amounts, and where was the money spent, what bonds were issued, what investments were made. There's also an obligation that we placed in the agreement that requires Iowa State to begin the investments in the arts facilities before accumulating a balance of more than $4 million in the capital improvements fund. So the concern I think that we had was, well, it's up to ISU, according to the agreement, to decide what specific Iowa State Center improvements to make and when. But we didn't want a situation where Iowa State waited for a long period of time before making those investments. Not that we believed that Iowa State would necessarily do that, but we wanted to ensure that through this agreement, we're making improvements right away. So Iowa State has to make improvements before that initial balance gets to $4 million. So we'll have fully transparent financial information on an annual basis from SciTown. We will, our finance department will audit or will review those audited financial statements at the same as we are preparing the statements that go out to Iowa State for the amounts of pilot to collect. And that brings me to another point. I want to make it clear. So we use the term pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, in this agreement in probably a different way than we might use it for other payment in lieu of tax kinds of situations. We don't have a lot of examples of that, but of pilots that the city operates. But we're using it as sort of a term of convenience, right? I get it's different than what you might traditionally think of as a pilot. We're focused on what happens to the city-specific portion, an equivalent amount that would be collected from the tenants if they were located in the private sector on clearly taxable property, right?
I appreciate that. It just goes to the level of thoughtfulness that has gone into this agreement, and several of the emails that I received expressed concerns about accountability and just how this would work out. And that's why I asked that question, because there's really a lot built into this to address those concerns. Thank you.
Brian, I think that the other thing that we heard frequently in emails was that we weren't asking for enough, that we should be holding out for more money. And it's my understanding that we don't have any leverage in this situation, really, to hold out. It's either we make the best of this situation, or the university does not have to sign an agreement and might possibly then not be paying taxes or the pilot.
Well, I think like any agreement, this is a product of each of the parties trying to represent their interests and coming to a solution that is as good as possible for their situation, and that each one can live with. I think that there is risk for the city if we were to say no to this agreement. There's risk, right? There's risk that the university might sour the relationship somehow with Iowa State. There's risk that the university might try to proceed, and in which case it would be able to collect perhaps these monies and not put it towards the specific use that's required in the agreement. There's risk in not proceeding with what's been put forth, right? Now you may believe that risk is worth taking, and that we should not approve the agreement and try for something different. I think though that, if the city was to say, no, we're going to ask for more, I think it would be perfectly within Iowa State's right to say, no, we're going to ask for more. I mean, it's a negotiation. I don't think that there's much more room to get here. We have explored a lot of different ways that we might come to a mutually agreeable set of agreements here. And I think this final agreement that is in front of the council represents the best possible outcome that we could voluntarily negotiate.
So I think that leads to the other question that I've seen frequently, which is, doesn't this agreement kind of leave the Ames Community School District and DMAC and Story County hanging?
So we've mentioned this, I believe, to the council before. Our interest in this is negotiating what happens with the city portion of the funds. It's up to those other entities to do their own deal with Iowa State about what happens there. We have informed those other entities that this is our agreement, and we've encouraged them, go talk to the university and try to work out an arrangement that's satisfactory to you. But we don't feel like we can negotiate on their behalf through this arrangement.
And
Excuse me, I might add, in the agreement itself, we did contemplate if negotiations take place, we placed in there an obligation that if they negotiate a better deal from one of their entities, we will get that same deal. So we anticipate that this is a very public process. This has not been secret, what we've been doing in the last year. We'd hope that if anybody wanted to step forward and negotiate, meaning the school district or county, they're certainly free to do it, but we're not in a position to negotiate for them. We haven't been given the authorization, nor should we. But we protected you, the citizens, and the city's part. If there's a better deal given, we will get that better deal.
I think one of the other concerns I've heard has to do with whether we're actually protecting local businesses because of this do not compete ordinance. I'm not even sure where it is. The Iowa Code question about do not compete. There are many people who are concerned about Ames businesses and the fact that now there seems that there will be competition, but that we as a council or a city are not willing to litigate that in order to stand up for the citizens. And
The citizens or the other companies.
yes,
Well, everything we do in economic development, every time we bring in a new company, and you get excited about every new company, you're competing against an industry that exists today. For anytime we bring in a new restaurant, you're competing against it. So I think we want to make sure it's an even playing field. Maybe that's what you're asking for. But that's in the eyes of the beholder. But
well, I'm actually asking, I mean, do we have any standing? I mean, we are not the
Nope.
wronged parties.
we have not pursued litigation, and that will be one of the issues we'll have to deal with. Do we have standing as a city, or will it have to be someone who is in competition in the private sector? We haven't pursued that yet, and we tried to avoid that, quite frankly. But that'll be an issue, and we're not confident we would win. We're not sure we would lose either. It might damage the relationship with the university. That may cause us a problem, but competition is always a tricky thing when you bring in anybody new is in competition with the existing businesses. So that's the basis for SciTown, right? Does SciTown compete? Is it going to negatively affect the rest of the economy or the businesses in Ames? I don't know. I don't think so. We don't believe so. We think all new businesses add energy. That's one of the goals of the council. Remember, you wanted to create improve the entertainment areas and things like that in town, make it more attractive. And this is certainly going to be I think a positive influence on the community. Will it compete against other restaurants here? Perhaps so, right? It probably will. Will the hotel compete? Probably so. Obviously, the people who own hotels and restaurants would have a better standing, perhaps, if they wanted to take action or challenge this contract than we would. But we don't know yet what we have standing.
So
Any other questions, Gloria or Tim?
Nope, those are the ones that came up in the emails that we received, I think.
Rachel, any questions?
Oh, no.
Nita, Robin? Emily?
People in the audience.
All right. All right, we will go ahead and open up public comment on this. And council, as Gloria alluded to, there were quite a few emails that we received. I know council read through all of them, took them into consideration as they've I think you tried really hard to bring those to light and to the forefront. I think Brian did also in his presentation. So is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this? And I see Senator Quirmbach, you're invited to address council. Thank you for coming.
Well, and thank you. My name is Herman Quirmbach. I live at 1002 Jarrett Circle in Ames. And as the mayor alluded, I have the honor of representing District 25 in the Iowa State Senate. That is almost all, not quite all, but it's almost all of the city of Ames. I wanted to say a few things, raise a couple of issues with regard to the Sci-Town proposal. And first of all, I want to thank city staff, city manager, and others for helping educate me about some of the nitty-gritty details here. The first topic I want to talk about is the one alluded to just a moment ago, which is anti-competition. The chapter in the Code of Iowa related to this is Chapter 23A, and that I'd like to quote from that just a little bit. 23A begins by saying, the state agency or political subdivision shall not, unless specifically authorized by statute, rule, ordinance, or regulation, engage in the manufacturing, processing, sale, offering for sale, rental, leasing, delivery, dispensing, disputing, or advertising of goods and services to the public, which are also offered by private enterprise. So that's a pretty general statement that you shouldn't be supporting private enterprise with a public institution. Now, if you read down in section 2 of that, subsection 8 gives you some exceptions. It says the chapter does not apply to any of the following, and there are a lot of paragraphs there of exceptions. You get down to paragraph K, and it says the following activities of an institution or school under the control of the state board of regents or a school corporation. Those are accepted. The list has 10 items there. Nowhere in that list, it does mention residence halls, but nowhere in that list does it mention luxury apartments or any type of private housing. As I have read, has been one of the elements that might be proposed for Sci-Town. Nowhere in this list does it mention private office space. Nowhere in this list does it mention medical facilities, at least not ones that serve humans. The Vet College is one of the exceptions, but McFarland is not. It does not mention any real estate in general, except items that carry the ISU logo. And it does not mention any general restaurants that are open to the public. So in my view, what is being proposed by the university and using university resources certainly violates the spirit of Chapter 23A and quite likely violates the letter of Chapter 23A. Next topic is the financial interests of the school district and the county, and also the community colleges to a little bit. What is being proposed here is that the university collect from its tenants payment in lieu of taxes. The part, though, that represents or is equivalent to what would be paid to the school district or to the county are collected by the university, but not forwarded to the county or the university. They get to keep that amount. What landlord in town wouldn't like to collect half the property tax, or actually more than half the property tax, and not give it to the local government? To offer some specific numbers, the value of the project that's been quoted in the press is $200 million. I'll take that as at least a benchmark estimate of its value. With regard to the school property tax, and setting aside the foundation, which I know that Councilwoman Rollins is aware how complicated that is, there are levies for management, for PEPL, physical plant and equipment levy, and for the debt service. Those three levies added together add to $6.26 per thousand of taxable valuation now. Well, if the 200 million were fully taxable, you multiply that by 6.26 per thousand, and what you get is $1,252,000 a year. Those are funds that would be collected by the university, but not sent on to the school district. The school district would be left without those revenues. Now, maybe not all of the, if the 200 million is the assessed value, then it gets rolled back a little bit, but you're talking about probably at least 1.1 million, not 1.2. For the county, the applicable tax rate in the city is $4.50 per thousand taxable, times 200 million, that's about 900,000 for the county. If a rollback applies, maybe it's only 800,000. But between the two, you're getting close to $2 million of payment in lieu of taxes that don't go to the public entities that need those tax revenues to provide the services. So I think that is, I think that's very troubling. Our schools are seriously underfunded. It's a battle I've been fighting down in the legislature for years. I don't need to go into details. Let's just say they need all the money they can get. They're not getting what they need to from the state. And for a state institution to come along and do the kind of thing that they're proposing here would not be appropriate. Well, how would this all play out in business development scenarios? Well, there are several possible scenarios, of course, and nobody can completely predict the future. Let's suppose that the businesses that locate in Sci-Town are all brand new businesses. No loss of business in the rest of the community. They're all brand new businesses. Well, I'm fine with businesses coming to town. I love that. I love competition. I'm an economist, 40 years experience going. But the competition has to be, as was said, on a level playing field. And I've tried to go through the nitty gritty of the pilot levies. It turns out that the net tax rate is a little bit lower than what other businesses would have to pay. Not all of the land is fully taxable. So if the new businesses come, well, that's in addition to the property tax base. If the schools in the county can collect on that, then they don't have to collect as much from the rest of us, and the schools in the counties can afford to lower their tax rate. And speaking as a private citizen and a homeowner, I would love to pay a little bit less in the way of property taxes. A different scenario would be that the businesses that occupy Sci-Town are in competition with existing businesses, and perhaps because they have an advantage, they run those other businesses out of business. Or maybe those other businesses relocate to the more advantageous location in Sci-Town. That means that there's a net reduction in the property tax base. And that's an even worse situation, because that means the schools and the counties are going to have to raise their property tax rates in order to generate the revenue they need to provide their services. So one way or another, the taxpayers are going to be footing a big section of the bill from the pilot proposal.
Senator, could you
Almost done.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I'm a big fan of Iowa State Center. I've been to a lot of performances at gatherings at Sheeman and performances at the other venues. If you want to help, if the university wants to help generate revenue to help renovate the Iowa State Center, there's a simple way to do that. Subdivide the land, sell the land to a private developer, take the proceeds from that land sale and invest it in the rehabilitation of those facilities. You, I think, have read the Sunday editorial by Steve Ringley in the Ames Tribune. Previously, Sue Ravenscroft is published in the Ames Tribune. I have worked with both of those individuals for many years. Sue is a retired professor of accounting. Steve has deep experience in business development. I have huge respect for them. they both conclude that the net monies going to the Iowa State Center would not reach the level of more than superficial improvements there. The $100 million that is estimated to be needed, Ringley says not in our lifetime. Ravenscroft says maybe within 100 years. So there's a better, faster way to get the money, sell the property. My recommendation to you tonight, just to close here, put the brakes on this. You don't have to pass this tonight. Put the brakes on this. First of all, I would urge you to get independent legal opinion with regard to the non-compete clause or chapter in the Code of Iowa. You don't want to get down the line to a situation where the university gets sued in court, the court puts a hold on the project, and you're left with a whole bunch of unfinished buildings there that may never be finished if the university loses its case. You should get the legal environment cleared up before you go ahead with this. And the other thing, it would give you time to collaborate with the schools and with the counties. Mr. Mayor, we have always had a great relationship with other units of government, with the school district and with the county. The three have always worked well together in my experience, and I go back quite a ways now. I would urge you to give them the time and to work with them to help them at minimum recoup some of the revenue that they otherwise would be due. So that would be my request tonight. I appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for indulging me, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Senator. Is there anybody else who wants to address council on this particular item? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Council?
I appreciate Senator Cornbach's very cogent remarks and a lot of thoughtful comments made. And it seems like there should be some effort to provide some response to that, since he made the effort to speak to us tonight. Brian, could you address how the city has approached Chapter 23A, the non-competition by government statute, and how we frame that? I mean, we haven't, I guess my point is we have not ignored that. So this has been a topic of conversation. My goal in these questions is just to indicate the work that we have done in order to address these things. So this isn't the first time that we've thought through these issues.
We have had many lengthy conversations with the university about Chapter 23A and its applicability. I would point out there are some other provisions within Chapter 23A that grant additional powers to Regents institutions to establish their own rules regarding other forms of competition, and I think the university would point towards those, which give it additional authority, perhaps. But ultimately, we feel like it is not clear enough to city staff that we would prevail on those points. I think that if we were to contest that issue with the university, there is a chance that we may not prevail, in which case the university would be free to build what it wants. And we wouldn't have these agreements, right? If we have these agreements, then even if someone else later down the line, a private business entity, was to challenge the university and prevail, we still have these agreements. And the university is still bound to do the things that are in the agreements that still remain after that dispute is resolved. So from my perspective, there's very little risk for the city in approving the agreements as is, because a reversal through a court action or something like that would would not impact these agreements as much as it would if it was to happen before we tried to negotiate these agreements, right?
And the senator has raised the specter, and it's an interesting one, that we're a year or two into this, and then a private sector organization brings a lawsuit, and the litigation is successful. How does that play in? I mean, certainly the city still is protected because of the agreement, so you made that point clear. But are there other aspects about the viability of the plan in that situation?
Those are risks that are borne entirely by Iowa State, not by the city. And if Iowa State wants to enter into that kind of risk, and the Board of Regents want to enter into that kind of risk, that's their decision to do so. It's not ours. We, as a city, have virtually zero risk in this. We're not investing in any of the infrastructure. The university is paying for the infrastructure and giving it to us. We manage the infrastructure, although it's arguable that that infrastructure would be a benefit whether the Sci-Town development occurred or not, with regard to things like traffic. So we are taking on, as a city, virtually no risk whatsoever.
Okay, and then Senator Cornbach has run some numbers on the financial interests of the schools and county. Can you speak just sort of broadly to our posture with respect to the potential lost revenues for the school and county?
No, I don't think so. I want to assure you that we in local government, city government, are just as concerned about revenue loss. You understand? We entered into this agreement not because we were afraid we were going to lose in any court battle. We were trying to meet the council's goal of dealing with a community that can attract people with entertainment and other type of activities. The centerpiece of this community, one of the 5 best attractions in this community, I would hasten to say, is Iowa State Center. It has lost its luster over the years. There's more competition out there. We don't want our people to have to drive to Des Moines, have to drive to Davenport, have to drive to other places for those. We want to restore this facility. We may not be restored to its preeminence, but we have to be competitive. Now, how do we do that? We take advantage of it, but the citizens of Ames have never contributed to that, never contributed anything to it. Not only to the initial construction, but the ongoing operations, which I'm confident has an annual deficit, as I know these facilities are. So we made a conscious effort to suggest to the city council that we defer precious revenues, even for ourselves, to meet the long-term goals of the city council. We couldn't afford to build it with property tax money. So we have an innovative way now to finance the improvements at Iowa State. Now, their listing of $100 million, if you ask me what our capital improvement needs over the next 10 years, I could come up with $500 million. I know I'm not going to raise enough money to do that. The money that's raised will not pay cash for it. They will borrow money for it and pay it over time. So you can borrow a lot more money. You get more principal to pay for these. I don't think anybody believes they're going to fix $100 million in our lifetime. But whatever they do is going to be prioritized and is going to bring luster back to this facility that we need, our citizens need. It's an innovative way to finance it. But when you talk about lost revenue, we're losing 1/3 of the revenue. We know that. Maybe people don't agree with that. You have to balance, though, the benefit of restoring this facility versus the revenue you might gain in operations. We think from what you told us, you don't want to lose that status with Iowa State University.
Right.
So that's what's driving us.
I might just add that I think many of you were on council when the announcement was made that they might close CY Stevens. Remember that? And we had people coming to the podium and saying, why are we not putting money into the Iowa State Center? Because they believe that that is really an important aspect to the community as well, too. In our ongoing conversations with Iowa State, when we've talked to them for years, I just have made that very clear that, you know, from the city standpoint, we believe, and I think that even some of the op-ed pieces that have appeared in the paper have said, if certain things were changed, they would support it also. But the point is that I think it's not just the council's goal. I believe our community is aware of the fact that we haven't put money into it. And we're very committed to trying to, I think that's what one of the beauties of this agreement is it binds them, because if they went ahead and off on their own and just said, forget it, we'll just do it on our own, they have no obligation to put any money in the Iowa State Center. But I do believe that that's part of the reason why they're doing this project, is to help provide funds to make improvements to the crown jewel, I think one of the crown jewels in the community. It's a priority of Dr. Winterstein. I think it's a priority of the university. Anyway, and I'll just comment too regarding the school and the county. We asked several times when talking to them about, do we want us to bring in the school and the county, and we were told no, they would deal with them separately and independently, and so we respected that specific direction. So that's why we have asked that question, I think, over the last 12 months to 15, 16 months, is because we saw it as multiple, and they said, no, we will deal, we'll talk through that. So that's why we have not, there's nothing included in terms of what the school, and they're free to, and I've had conversations with both representatives from both county and the school district. They're aware, they've had questions, they've asked questions, I've filled them in, but said, you need to call and talk to them because they have asked that they be dealt with directly. And that's their lane. Our lane is this, their lane is dealing with them as well too, so.
Okay. Thanks to both.
Yep.
I don't have further questions.
I guess I have maybe one big question, and I found a lot of what the senator said very interesting, but I don't know how we have any power to act. We can't subdivide the land. It's not ours. We can't ensure that this thing isn't built because the Board of Regents has already approved it. So it will go ahead, assuming it has the easements necessary. And I don't think we've discussed that issue yet. So I'm not really sure what our powers as a city council are in stopping Sci-Town from moving ahead or even putting the brakes on, because it's not under our control. Am I wrong in that interpretation?
We haven't explored all avenues. If you wanted to stop the project, that would have to do with not providing utilities. I bet that's probably the only way we could do that. And I'm not sure what our obligation is yet to do that. But you're right. They've hired a developer. There's going to be financing for the project. That's all without the payment of a tax necessarily. But would they go ahead without this agreement? You'll have to speak to them, but I think they probably would.
All right, any other questions? Did you have a question, Gloria, on the easements? You mentioned that.
Well, no, I mean, I think Steve just answered that.
I will say it's nice to see all these wrapped into getting these taken care of. That was one of the concerns the staff had, was providing, access across some of the property that Iowa State owns to provide water, sewer, electricity. And it's my understanding that they have satisfactorily provided the access or other alternatives if something doesn't work appropriately or whatever, to take care of it. And again, as Brian said, they're putting in all the utilities, and then like regular development, and then deeding them over to the city. All right, is there a motion relative to the memorandum of understanding relating to the Sci-Town development?
I would move approval.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
I would just thank everybody for their comments, and as was said already too. And just if people are watching at home, I hope that they've understood by now, or that, that it's a little clearer that that Iowa State's not asking our permission on this issue, right? And we're getting the best deal we can, and staff have done a really great job negotiating what we can get. And without the pilot, we wouldn't be getting anything. I think that's something that I think is really important for people to absorb. So I hope people watching at home have kind of picked that up through our discussion here tonight. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would add to this. I think it's important to indicate, to reflect on, we have a very complex and robust relationship with Iowa State. So this is a very unique community. And so there are a whole host of ways in which we have a very vital and robust partnership with Iowa State. And I think this agreement represents a very important and healthy agreement that's in light of this broad context, whether it's in our parks, whether it's how we handle our roads. I mean, so many different ways in which our relationships are intertwined. And so I just think it's important to understand that there's a context beyond this agreement in isolation.
Thank you.
Could I just make one other statement? That would be that I hope that council, once this vote passes, I don't mean, once we get past this vote, whether it passes or not, I hope that council will continue to be considering putting money into the arts in ways other than just this agreement. Because I think there is concern that we might say, dusted and done, we've made the agreement and now we don't need to do any more for the arts in Ames. And I don't think that's the case.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. And I entertain a motion on resolution approving Sci-Town Development Area Construction, Utilities, Traffic, and Related Services Memorandum of Understanding.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And entertain a motion on resolution approving Sci-Town Development Area Water and Sanitary Sewer Utility Easement Agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. And entertain a motion on resolution approving Sci-Town Development Area Electrical Easement Agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Steve, for all your efforts. And we will move on to item number 50, Ames Economic Development Commission presentation of annual report. Dan?
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Dan Culhane here with the Ames Chamber of Commerce and Ames Economic Development Commission. Tonight here in my capacity as the CEO of the Economic Development Commission. I've got some handouts here. I believe you may have also had that in your packet, but I always like to give you a hard copy as well. You know, I'm like a broken record, but if you've been here 18 years, you probably tend to start sounding like that. I've been here a long time, and yet I'm still energized and excited about the work that we get to do on your behalf as an economic development organization. You know, we're a unique animal in that we do economic development work in a university town, and so we've got the benefit of having a very large industrial corridor called Prairie View Industrial Center, which I'm grateful to all of you for supporting that over the years and supporting the Whiffles project that is certainly well underway. If you've been out there at all recently, it looks like it might be done, but they're moving on to the next project very soon. But at the same time, we've got a very rich and robust research park that's also a key piece of our arsenal as we talk to private sector industries, both domestic and international. We've had a number of international firms look at the research park in the last year. We work part and parcel with that organization in supporting that and trying to help them locate in the research park. Pivot Bio is also in that presentation that you've got in front of you. That is a California-based company, but nonetheless a company we helped bring to the park a few years ago where they leased, I think, about 2,000 square feet. They were out of that in about 8 months into about 8,000 square feet. And now they're in an absolutely beautiful facility that they cut the ribbon on here a month or so ago. And so the economic development activity that we get to play with, if you will, is really dynamic. And, you know, I joked a long time ago, and I still would today, or I was prior, the phone worked. We could call out from that phone, but it never rang. And I'll tell you, the phone rings here constantly. Our emails there's constant activity as it relates to economic development activity here in our marketplace. And so we're thrilled with that. I can't put anything together like this without at least mentioning the great project you supported last summer, about almost a year ago now, with the 3M project, a legacy manufacturer here in our state, but certainly in North America, but around the world. They continue to provide really rich and meaningful employment opportunities here in our community. I think they're around 55 years in Ames at this point in time. And that expansion was a nice shot in the arm here in the last year. Congratulations to all of you. You broke ground on the Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center a couple weeks ago. We're an economic development organization, but we're also a community development organization. And so supporting things like that, supporting the Miracle Playground and a whole host of things, the farmers market, all these things, they're all part and parcel to creating a rich community. And I've been doing this for 30 years, a lot longer than maybe even I planned. But I'm grateful for the opportunity. But it's changed a lot when you think about economic development, because there's so much more that goes into that. And that's why we've expanded our borders too. And we're working in multiple counties now. And what I love about that is it gives us the ability and the financial wherewithal to have a very strong bench of people supporting a wide variety of things, whether it's workforce, it's social media, it's beautiful publications like this that clearly I've had nothing to do with. You've known me long enough that is not my expertise. But at the end of the day, we've always got people to support the rich opportunities here in the Ames community. And that's why I'm really grateful for the way we've evolved as an organization. You'll see on the third page, you'll see the word Purdue. We were in Lafayette and West Lafayette, Indiana with our inner city leadership visit last year. Thanks to those of you who were able to attend. Our DC visit, our symposium on building inclusive organizations. We still believe in that work. We still think that's very important work. We're going to continue to do that. We appreciate your partnership in that. Women in Leadership, the Ukraine Workforce Workshop. That's something that we did as a result of what's going on in our world. We've seen a number of Ukrainian refugees locate in our market, and they're folks that are looking for meaningful employment opportunities, just like anybody else. And so we've engaged in that, and certainly we spend a lot of energy on the Veterans Network as well. You can't talk about what's happened in Ames in the last 12 months without at least putting a picture of Ragbri in downtown Ames from last summer. That wasn't a focal point of Ames economic development, but nonetheless, everybody that touches Ames economic development at 304 Main Street had a big hand in that. And I think we picked up beer cans until 3:30 in the morning the next day. But it was worth it because it was a great way to showcase what a rich and vibrant community the Ames community and the Iowa State University community is. We kicked off Traction Magazine in the last year. And frankly, we've done that in large part because we think there's a void in the amount of information that's distributed. I've had a few people call me and criticize the publication. It's so positive. And I said, well, we're in the business of trying to put a really happy spin on a lot of things. We want people to come here. We want people to feel welcome here and move their business here, move their families here. Come to Iowa State University to get an education, whatever it might be, retire here. And so the more we can do to accentuate all the good stuff that's going on in our market and our region, that should be our job. And so we're really proud of that. And we simply say thank you for your feedback when those folks call and want to be taken off the list for Traction. We flip to the back page. I can't thank you enough for the leadership you provided in the last few months on the Ames residential tax abatement. That's an important program. Is that going to change night over day and we're going to see 300 houses built in this community? No, but I believe it will move the needle, and I'm grateful for that. And the last thing I'd point to is a census data visual here. It shows the inflow and outflow of people, and you can get these for most communities in this country. We've got them for a number of communities around the Ames MSA, but this is the Ames diagram in particular that I wanted to bring to your attention. You'll see that 22,760 people come to Ames every day to go to work. 11,091 people that live in Ames go somewhere else to go to work. My question is, it's not just for you, but it's for me. It's for everybody in this community. 22,000, almost 23,000 people come here to work every day. What would happen if 10% of those people lived here? What would happen to our schools? Not just the Ames school, but the school districts that touch Ames. What would happen to our human service agencies, churches? The list goes on, of all our United Way, of all the things that we desire as citizens in this great community. What would happen if 2,000 more people lived here? Or I was really thinking about using the number 25%. What if another 5,000 or 6,000 people lived here that work here instead of going home to someplace else? Or it doesn't matter where they go, they're gone. But if we kept them here, if they could live here, if they could engage in this community, how much more rich would our community be across the spectrum? And so that's why I'm grateful for the residential tax abatement. Again, I don't think it's going to get 25% of those folks to move here, but I do think it'll move the needle. So thank you for that. I'll stop there. Our work is well documented. Steve Shanker sits on our board, and so does Anita. And I appreciate that. I think all of you have had a turn at one time or another serving on the AEDC board, and we appreciate that. And so, Mayor, I will stop there and entertain any questions you might have. And again, thank you on behalf of our board of directors for the strong investment you make in our organization and the work you allow us to do here in the Ames community.
Thank you, Dan. Questions?
Does the the infographic on the back there, that 11,810 that's in that circle arrow, is that people that live in Ames and work in Ames? And
Yes, I should have clarified that.
is
Yes.
I'm just surprised that number is the same as, oh yeah, I'm surprised that's a low number.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
A couple of comments. We can take economic development for granted, but you don't have to spend very much time in the news to look at communities around the country that lose a major employer. We've seen this recently in central Iowa. And so we can't take our foot off the gas, and we appreciate the work that you're doing. Just a couple of things I want to highlight. You personally, Dan, have done a lot to raise funds, whether it's for the airport hangar project, for the pool. I mean, these are projects that might not have happened, or they would have been on a much smaller scale if it wasn't for your efforts. And there's really, I'm very proud of our businesses in the area. We have many businesses that are givers, and they're very much corporate citizens. And so we really appreciate, I don't know that I would have had the vantage point to appreciate that if it wasn't for sitting where I am, and I just really appreciate the work you're doing. But it's very personal. Sometimes Dan will be out with his wife taking care of the weeds, pulling weeds, or doing beautification projects on Main Street. So there's very much a hands-on aspect, the ownership that you and your organization have in trying to make this community a better place. We don't say thank you enough, and so we really appreciate that. And then finally, when I started here 10 years ago, we didn't have nearly the level of collaboration with local governments that we do today, and that's largely due to your leadership. And I think that when we look at economic development from a regional perspective, we're stronger together. And what you're doing, for example, the new facility coming in to Boone, that's certainly going to be a great benefit to Boone, but that's going to benefit all of this area. And so thinking outside of our silo and thinking more in a regional perspective, that's your leadership. And so thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to what's ahead. I think our brighter days are ahead of us.
Thank you.
I have a comment and a question. I'm really glad to hear that in some form or another, the Symposium on Building Inclusive Organizations is going to continue, whatever form it takes, with ISU being under the mandate of the state at this point for reducing DEI. So thank you for continuing to work on that key component of our community, making people feel welcome and building places within organizations that they feel they can contribute. My question is, do you have anything you want to say about the rebranding of the AEDC? Since I know this is probably the last time we'll see this particular thing.
It's a secret till June 25th, but it's the worst kept secret around. So we are moving towards a regional name for the organization. The name Ames will still be in it. I'd rather not go into any more detail because My friend Celia is right here from the Tribune, and she'll want to talk to me about it afterwards. But I would say that our name today, we've outgrown it a long time ago. And yet, Ames is still the epicenter of, in Iowa State University, is still the focal point of our economic development efforts. However, what's been really unique about expanding our borders, if you will, Gloria, is that there are times when things will not work in Ames. And so when we've got other sites to showcase to people, it keeps them in the region. And I can almost assure you that a number of folks from Daisy, the corporate organization out of Dallas, as they built their facility here in the Ames MSA, because that's what it is in Boone, they will ultimately have a lot of people living here in the Ames community with very significant employment opportunities that we're excited to have. And back to your comment or your compliment on the DEI work, it's important work because DEI is so wide, and I think people lose sight of that sometimes too. And we haven't lost sight of that. We understand how important it is for people with physical disabilities to get into a workplace and do meaningful work. And we've got Danfoss here in Ames as one example. We've got Hawkeye Moldings up in Roland doing a great job with people with learning disabilities and a wide variety of things like that. DEI is catches a very wide swath of the population. That's why we'll continue to do it, because it's not singular, it's very broad. And we know our work it's kind of like you did this with your hands a moment ago about the arts. It's the same with DEI. That work is never done.
Mhm.
Just like the work in investing in the arts or investing in economic development, as you mentioned, Tim, it's never done. Communities that stand still and say, we're done,
Right.
they lose.
Right.
They lose. And communities that lose large industries, it isn't because they weren't trying to go forward. Sometimes you just have bad luck and the world turns and facilities close. And people that make decisions on behalf of companies, and they live somewhere else, and they don't really care about that local community where that facility or that office building sits. They make that choice, and it's an easy choice to make because they don't know any of us. And so that's the nature of it. But at the same time, that's why we should be working. You should expect my team and I to be working every day to find that next Workiva, that next REG that gets purchased by Chevron. And gratefully, Chevron's building a beautiful R&D center out along Interstate 35 in the Ames community, which is going to be a fantastic investment, but also another way to plow a bunch more very meaningful employment opportunities into our community. Now, the challenge is we've got, and this is long told, is a lot of those folks live someplace else. Their CEO lives someplace else. And she said, Dan, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that I don't live here. And I said, how many houses did you have to look at when you came to town? She said, 2. And one was on 8 acres. And she said, I don't have time to mow the lawn. I just don't have time to mow that much lawn. And so I'm long past being grumpy or sad about when someone says they live someplace else. That's the world we live in too. But we have to give people more choice. And I think that the tax abatement program and just raising this issue, everybody knows there's a housing shortage, right? But raising this issue to a higher level at this table and at the community's table, leadership table, has to be a priority going forward, because we do work in Huxley. We love that community, but they shouldn't be building more houses than Ames ever, based on sheer size. So I'll stop there. Anybody else got a question? I bet you don't. You got a lot of agenda left.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you all.
All right, also on the agenda is a resolution approving the 2024-2025 funding contract for Ames Economic Development Commission. Is there any questions on that? Hearing none, entertain a motion relative to that resolution.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. All right, move on to item number 51, summary of Harrison Road surplus land neighborhood outreach meeting for housing infill options.
Just give us 1 minute, Mayor, to bring up the reports. We have graphics. All right. Good evening. Tonight we are here to report out on a public neighborhood meeting that our planning staff held. As we indicated in the report, back in December, we had a discussion about infill opportunities in the city. Part of that was focused on larger neighborhood areas, redirection areas, but we also said there's some opportunities for smaller infill sites. And we identified that the city had surplus land out at this intersection of Welbeck and Harrison Road. It's in a residential neighborhood, as you can see here. And we thought it was a good opportunity to explore the ability to look at how we could do other types of detached housing for the city. We indicated that might be an opportunity for a pocket neighborhood, a small lot development. It could even be standard, typical single family detached dwellings. At that time, council said that we could go forward with a public meeting, get input on what the opinion of this lot was and what type of development might be favorable for the area. When we approached this site, we looked at it again through the lens of Plan 2040, our housing needs in the community, as well as our policies about how do you do context sensitive infill. And that was really attractive to planning staff when looking at this site as in possibly an example test case to do that. So we have language about infill is good in the community. Infill must also be respective of the environment around it. And this site, as you can see, has some frontage on a street, but also is set pretty much back from many of the existing homes. They have some larger rear setbacks. It's not the same kind of infill context that you typically see. So to begin this neighborhood meeting, our staff explored a couple of different layouts just to kind of give some visualization of how housing could fit on this site. It's really looking at low density housing for the most part. We have almost 2 acres, and we've drawn examples of 5 to 12 units. So we're looking at below the maximum density range of just what we call our regular residential neighborhood 2 type of development district. The area includes a variety of housing already as well. So immediately abutting the lot, it is detached single family standard lot homes, but just to the east on Harrison Road, you're going to find some PUDs that include small lot homes, 2 or bi-attached single family homes, and a little bit further to the east of Hyde, you have some true townhome development. So in this area, you see a lot of different housing along that Harrison corridor. In this immediate area, you do see the single family detached. The outcome of the meeting was that the neighborhood really very clearly articulated no interest in seeing development on this lot. We've included that input for you. For the most part, there wasn't a dialogue about the type of housing. It was primarily focused on that the space should remain as open space and should not be made available for development. What we're asking as staff tonight, this is truly surplus land to the city. We have no other purpose for it. It was originally platted for the sake of a road extension that's never going to happen. And it looks as a valuable infill opportunity. We think of it as an asset to meet our housing goals. What we're asking for tonight is direction from council on whether to proceed with a request for proposals. Development of this site would not be by the city. Our intent would be, if council wants to move forward, we would put an RFP out, solicit proposal from developers. We would essentially transfer the land to them, and they would go through an entitlement process. An RFP would identify the type of housing that council is willing to support, a range of housing or building types that you want to see. It's something that we'll come back to you with more detail. Tonight, we don't have that RFP. So if you choose that option, we would return likely by the end of June with that RFP to get that available to developers for review this summer and have them have an opportunity to move through the entitlement process this fall if there is someone that's interested in building on this site. So I know there's probably speakers here from the neighborhood as well, but if there's any comments or questions for staff at this time, we'd be happy to field those.
Questions?
Kelly, could you give us a little history if you know it? And I apologize, I should have thought about this and to prep you for this, but do you know the history of how this land was developed in such a way as that this parcel is the city land as it is today? Can you give us just a little bit of history on
A
this?
little bit. The long ago transportation plan of the city had this idea that Harrison Road, whether it was named that or not, was going to weave through this northern edge of the city and connect over to Highway 69 and kind of be this parallel collector arterial street to Bloomington Road to add connectivity. That was a long-term vision from about 30 years ago. So when Bloomington Heights was platted in the early 2000s, that was still in the concept that Harrison Road would do that. So when that subdivision was approved, This was designed for Harrison Road to be a grade separated crossing of the railroad. I guess grade separated or at grade, probably grade separated would be required. So that was dedicated as an outlot, or not as an outlot, as Lot J to the city with this subdivision. That's how we came to possess it. And it wasn't, I don't believe it is dedicated as right away. It's just Lot J to the city. And that was its original intent. As development occurs, transportation plans change, the viability of and the cost of constructing Harrison as this parallel collector street became infeasible. It wasn't going to be able to be routed through Ada Hayden and accomplish its original task. So Northridge Heights did not end up with that corresponding matching area to connect to Stang. So we don't have that connection between Hyde and Stang that was envisioned. And it's really only on this side that we have this land, and there's no possible way to extend it any longer.
I think the history is valuable because, correct me if I'm wrong, if we knew then what we knew now about the transportation, this would never belong to the city today. This would have been, this would have houses on it and would have been developed at the same time as the neighborhoods. Am I saying that correctly?
I would expect that would have been the outcome, correct. There would have been no reason to set it aside for any other purpose.
Okay, great. That's why.
Other questions from staff?
Kelly, where's the nearest park?
Lloyd Kurtz is about a half a mile to the southeast of here. So that's on Hyde and Bloomington.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll open up public comment, and I have a number of individuals who have expressed interest electronically. We'll go through those first, and then after that, we'll open up to others who may not have registered but are interested, and I'll start with Dwayne Myers. You're welcome to come to the podium, and if you could try and condense your comments into 3, 4, 5 minutes, if you would, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Dwayne Myers, Ward 2. To answer some of those questions I think that you had before, I think, again, if we knew now what we before we had all of the information now that we did then, this either would have been a detention basin, a outlot that is owned by homeowners association like every other subdivision that's currently in Ames, which is why we don't have these outlots that are in the city's possession, which is why we have just this random one. Pretty much all the other ones have been turned into parks. You mentioned the park that is half a mile to the south. That is also at the intersection of Hyde and Bloomington. Getting across Hyde is virtually impossible. With the extension of Hyde going all the way up into Gilbert, actually Harrison and Hyde is super high traffic, and it transitions from 25 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour, but really it's 70 coming over the hills, dodging deer, to hopefully 35 into the neighborhood. I know there's been some requests for stop signs, traffic lights. I don't foresee a traffic light going in there, but a stop sign would be great. Yes, it would slow down traffic, but that's kind of the point, make it a little safer. Again, this has been city-owned since I moved in 2015. And prior to my moving there, the neighbor at the corner of Harrison and Welbeck has maintained that property, has mowed it, has not been done by the city. We have to clear out the drainage. When we've asked the city to clear out the drainage, it's simply scooping out the drain and dumping it onto our property, not hauling off the debris. So it's a little frustrating to see the thought of let's put in more houses and possibly build this area up and create more additional flooding issues, where we've already had some, again, nothing major, but it does back up. All the grass clippings go, I think the drainage goes all the way along the west side and then along the south side of the north properties there. So my request is that you read through the staff report that is pretty clear and concise, that says that the neighborhood does not want housing in this outlot. We'd like to keep it as green space, put out another park in, but essentially keep it as green space, whether that's park or not. Again, if the neighbor wasn't willing to mow it, it would be trees and forest and not probably on anybody's radar to be developed. So again, I think the neighborhood and the community has really embraced this space. Shortly after the public information meeting, I drove by every day and kids were out there playing baseball, hitting golf balls, flying kites. The kids love it. They use it. It's just a great spot. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next I have Gerald and Jennifer.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. I'm Gerald, and thank you for letting me bring my mom up. I live near the Harrison surplus land, and I like playing with my sister there and flying kites. I like playing baseball with my friends, and there's not that much green space left. So if we keep the green space, it'll bring more opportunities for games, like for kids around that live around the area. So we don't have to travel across Harrison and Welbeck and Hyde, because those are, especially Hyde, that it's a very busy street. So especially with little kids, it might be trouble, like for parents, it might be scary, like having their kid with an older brother or sister going there, like in case something bad happens. They wouldn't know until like they came home and like realized that something bad happened. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The future is bright with someone speaking so eloquently and without any nervousness. Thank you, Gerald. All right, we also have Lauren.
Good evening, Mayor. I just wanted to touch on the history of this. Knowing hindsight, is always 2020. But the reason why that Lot J was never established was because the railroad actually said to the city, if you make a crossing there, we're going to block it because that's our staging area. The railroad literally will park a train there in the morning, in the late evening. That's where they set up their like 8-mile long train to hit the time hacks going through the city. And hindsight 2020, you wouldn't, the city planners wouldn't have made these fancy little lines of streets. They would have made straight grids because that's most efficient. I live just north of this picture. I have a daughter and son, ages 7 and 10. This green space is close to the house. It's safe. I 20 years in the military. I've seen some nasty stuff. I'm family oriented. I have committed my life, in public service. And the last thing I want to do is become some grumpy old vet because my kid got hit by a car trying to cross, Hyde, because that's a busy old street where all this needs is a sidewalk. So possibly my daughter couldn't go down Welbeck to, see one of her friends without crossing streets. That'd be very helpful. And other than that, really, there's no way. I know some city planners have came up with elaborate designs, but realistically, if you put a 2-lane road in there, you're already gobbling up the majority of that lot, and it just wouldn't match the local area. And I know you're talking about the townhomes to the east, and that's true. It's a lot of elderly retired people with for these townhome communities, and there is no green space up there. Your green space is now pushed out to Ada Hayden. That's about 6 blocks, further east. So this is a very important green space. Due west of Lot J, there is a HOA that's a pond, but we don't have access to that because there's a fence and a railroad tracks currently there. So in order for anybody in our neighborhood to actually utilize that HOA location, they have to go down and around and crossing railroad tracks. So what we're just wanting is, if this would have been identified as not going to be continued in the intersection and the buildings and houses were already established, they would have immediately identified this as an HOA property. I know, Mary, you have wonderful HOAs, lakes about a couple blocks, away from you. I know, Garden, you have a beautiful park that's right in your backyard. These HOAs are something that you pride yourself on with your families. That's very valuable to your families, right? That's how we view this lot. And we just don't feel that realistically it's not a very prime location for any additional housing for the type that would want to come in here. And for the property issues and needing more housing, that's mostly because there's only a couple property kingpins that own all the surrounding property of Ames, and they're kind of sitting on. I know Hunziker owns the north, and they've been talking about doing apartments up there for years now. So I don't know why you're picking on the little guys, but that's what it kind of feels like. I know, Ms. Rowland, you have a wonderful Hickory Park over by your location. I used to deliver your mail about 8 years ago before I moved over to a little bit closer, and I am a mail carrier, so I do get to see a lot of the city. And there's a lot of other locations that are open and vacant, but they are owned by somebody. And currently, I do want to let you all know that there is no deed to this property right here. It is essentially just like property of a street. So if that matters at all of your parks have properties that are the deeds to the city of Ames. This one does not. This is the only property other than your roads, your streets, that does not have a deed on file with the Story County. So I just leave it to you. Hopefully you guys make the right choice and let our children have a safe green space. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, Stacy Baker.
Hi there. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk with you all tonight. My son, Aiden Monroe, wanted to say a few words. He's actually really interested in political science, and so this was a great opportunity for him to come address all of you.
Thank you. So my concern is I'm a pretty new driver, and the area that this is in has a lot of street parking and a lot of traffic already due to the residential area that it's in. And my concern would be that adding new housing would cause an increase in traffic. And there are lots of kids who, if they're not playing in the green space, they like to ride their bikes on the street. Even going across sidewalk crossings can be somewhat treacherous these days. And I would worry that we could end up with an accident or someone could get hurt. And just the concern that construction equipment could cause a lot of blockages with the roadway. That would be my worry. And then I'm also concerned about possible noise levels in the neighborhood. It can already get kind of loud sometimes, and adding more housing and more people could only make that worse. And I personally love that green space. There's a lot of wildlife out there, small wildlife, amphibians especially, which I enjoy going to look for and study. And I feel like constructing new housing there would disrupt their environment and make it very difficult for them to come into the neighborhood and allow kids the opportunity to study animals and to find that passion for nature and just the great outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is anybody else that wants to address council? Grant?
The concerns that have been raised about an increase in traffic, most of that is directly related to speed of traffic. And one thing that's definitely been raised here tonight that's adjacent to the housing issue is that we definitely need traffic calming on Hyde. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Anybody else? If you would just introduce yourself and then you can start.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Rex DeBrine, and I live at 2729 Laurel Street, which is just to the north of this open space. I've lived there with my family for about 10 years. It'll be 10 years, in fact, this July. And I've lived in Ames since 1996 when I came to Iowa State University to study as a student. So more than half my life at this point. I've not been able to attend previous opportunities to discuss this matter, so I appreciate the opportunity this evening. I am here to voice my opposition to any and all plans to develop the open space at the corner of Welbeck and Harrison. As many of my neighbors have previously shared, my family and I have enjoyed this open space in our neighborhood. We would be sad to see it developed in any way, but especially as some sort of housing project that would do more to line the pockets of some developer than it would to alleviate any housing issues in the city of Ames. In hindsight, leaving this plot of land open and not developing it during the original development of the Bloomington Heights neighborhood was probably a mistake, which we've previously discussed. But not every misstep leads to a bad outcome, and I would submit that this is a situation that would be included in that. This land, as it is, brings more to our neighborhood and community than a few extra homes. As I see it, there are two options before you. You can consider this space a happy accident and leave it as it is, or you can ignore the unanimous opposition of those from the neighborhood, proceed with this proposal, and prove that community input is not considered in Ames. The choice is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Paul Klein Walterink. I live at 4206 Welbeck, just a couple houses north of the one there in the corner. I'm opposed to this project also. I mean, we've got a good neighborhood. We need green space for the kids. I'm the old guy on the block for the most part. So it's been a real pleasure living in this neighborhood and getting to know the people of it. I would hate to see that green space used. I see kids playing baseball. I see kids golfing. I see kids doing things that kids do in green spaces like that. And at the very least, if you develop it in anything, put some playground equipment on it, but don't turn it into houses. So appreciate the time.
Thank you, Paul. All right, last call. All right, we'll close public input. All right, council. Thoughts, responses?
I think this is a really interesting one, and I do want to thank everyone for their input they gave, especially for the young folks who came out and gave input tonight. I think that's great, and I'm glad to see people taking an interest. And for the one who is interested in political science, I think this is an interesting topic in a broader sense too, because we've been talking about the need for housing in Ames specifically, but it's a national problem, right? And that's not news. I mean, it's been a growing national problem for a long time, the lack of housing. We also know that while it's expected that Ames will grow out, over time, and we wouldn't say that all of that is bad, the more a community does grow out, the less sustainable in a way that becomes. You have more infrastructure you need to maintain as the community footprint grows, right? Anyway, for all of these reasons, infill is, I think, very important to our housing strategy. And there's also a well-known concept, right, that very reasonable people might agree with concepts in general, but not want those in their own backyard. And we see that anytime we try to do an infill project, right? We saw that pretty recently up on Wilson, where they were talking about putting in a multifamily unit in that neighborhood, and the people came and they said, no, don't do that, make them single family houses. Here we have an open space where we're asking to put in single family houses, and it's, oh no, don't do that, keep it a green space. It's not that we haven't heard the public input, at least from my point of view. It's that we have to make hard decisions about that sort of infill sometimes. And so it's not that we don't listen to the public input, but it's that we're balancing a lot of factors, right? Because if it were up to every neighborhood, everyone would say no. They'd say no to every new housing development that might be proposed for infill. They'd say no to every social service building that might be proposed in their neighborhoods. That happens all the time, but we still need those things, right? They need to go somewhere. And I know it's hard, right? I get the arguments about the open space. So it's not that I'm not sympathetic. But I think my interest in, this is a low density development, right? We're not considering multifamily, a lot of units, that type of thing. So like I said, I'm very sympathetic, but I think this is a harder choice than just blowing off concerns. So.
Thank you. Other thoughts, comments? Anita?
I had a question, whether or not there's any opportunity for maintaining some of it as a green space, but then still, and I guess I've been intrigued by the cottage concept. So is there any opportunity to do something that might allow for both?
I think that would be in the RFP, you would want to instruct a developer if there's a set aside requirement or if it's all available for housing. That's going to significantly impact who's going to look at the property, is how many units you can have and if there's going to be limits on it. So I would say it's possible, but we would have to articulate that in the RFP. And we probably would structure that with preferences, because I would hate to go out and get nothing back because we're too prescriptive. So maybe the RFP structure is more about preferences rather than absolute. So we learned a little bit in the Baker subdivision experience about the more precise you are, the less interest you have. So there's a little bit to be talked about there. I can't say tonight that it needs to be in there. I also say it's also possible that it could be there.
Okay.
I don't know whether I have a question for you, Kelly. Maybe you have an answer for this, or maybe it's a Steve question or somebody else on council. In thinking about the proximity to Lloyd Kurtz, we are adding one mini pitch at Lloyd Kurtz, is that right?
Only one, yeah.
Which will reduce the green space that's available for just general play.
Not substantial. That's a huge park. The pitches are going to take up a major part.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
No,
I can't recall what the plan showed,
It's a large
Map?
park. It's very small compared to the
although it is quite a distance away.
half a mile, I think, is within our standards.
Yes, our Plan 2040 articulates a goal for residential development to be between 1/4 and 1/2 mile of a green space, whether that's a greenway or a park. And I know you're already familiar with, we have a hierarchy of park systems, right? So Lloyd Kurtz acts as the neighborhood park for this area. And because of its size, it's adding a community amenity to it, not just as a neighborhood park. So if you went across the street or across the railroad tracks, you can see, I just pulled up the location map here. So red circles where we're at. Lloyd Kurtz is this green parcel here. And then Northridge Heights has a 4-acre parcel, I believe it's 4 acres over here. And that's a neighborhood park. It doesn't have any space for community facilities. That the combination of Stonebrook Church with this Lloyd Kurtz is one reason why there's more space here and why the mini pitch was selected to go there, because of the sharing of parking made that possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the context here of what the park layout is. They mentioned Auburn Trail to the north, and we had Hayden's Preserve even further north. So more park space would be developed eventually further north. I'm not going to promise that it's adjacent as close as this space is to anybody's houses, but there would be more park space developed further north when those developments do eventually occur.
I'm curious about the statement that there's no deed for this land. Do we own this land? What is the situation? Or I don't, Tim, you probably know better than I do because you deal with real estate things, but.
I mean, it's, I probably should not be giving legal advice to the city. I don't know, Mark, you want to clarify? I mean, I appreciate the concern about the ownership of the land, but we own this land.
Other questions?
So I think this is a harder issue. A lot of what we think through are reliance interests. And so let's say, for the sake of discussion, that this land was owned by someone who was going to use it for development purposes. This land then, you would look at this as, at some point, there would be houses built there. What's tricky here is that even though this has not been an official park, functionally, that's all it has been. And so it's served as a park, even though it's undesignated. And so I think this is a little bit different when we think about infill projects. I have been a big advocate of infill projects, but I think this is difficult in this case. Not every infill project we should support. But I think that particularly the length of time and the reliance that the neighbors have had on this make it more challenging to think through. And if we were to see development, I think that there should be some recognition of those reliance issues in the way in which the properties develop. So I think Anita's point recognizes a thoughtful approach to maybe finding a balance in recognizing those reliance issues with also the goal of seeing some development. So not trying to squeeze every possible housing unit out of this that we can, but also maintaining something that's more than just a swing set, but having some kind of space that's a viable open space. I think the people who spoke tonight were articulate and thoughtful and have certainly given us something to think about. And I echo Bronwyn's appreciation. People only show up when it matters, right? Most city council meetings, there's nobody here. And when it affects you, then all of a sudden you show up. And so we appreciate the comments that were made. But I think this is a hard issue tonight. I don't feel super strong on getting every possible unit out of this. And I'm a big advocate for housing. But I think there are places where a more nuanced approach, I think, is warranted. And I think maybe there's some possibility here.
Kelly, I have a question. Similar to Anita's comment about maybe adding green space or a park, would we be able to specify in the RFP something to do with the stormwater issues and drainage that people have commented on this site?
I think that's an issue that you address with Public Works. If that's an existing issue with our existing infrastructure, that's not a developer's problem. So the site is lined with stormwater flowage easements on both sides. There are conveyance features there from the original subdivision. So the developer would have to meet our 5B ordinance. They'd have to control releases. They could cause additional issues with backup if that's happening. But if there's an issue of maintenance, that's a Public Works issue today, whether we develop the property or not.
Doesn't sound like we've been maintaining the property, though. That kind of bothers me that that the neighbors are mowing it and taking care of it. And
Yeah, Steve, you have any thoughts on that?
I'd check on it. I don't know if we maintain it to the same level you'd maintain your grass, but grass height, but I think it's our responsibility to maintain it. So I don't know what's going on. I have to check.
What about, and this is, I think, just a question for council to mull over, but the speeding on Hyde issue has been brought to us before, right? And so if we do proceed with, a concept of developing or partially, perhaps even developing this property, I think we do need to take another look at traffic control crossing height so that, getting to that Lloyd Curtis Park is more feasible, or traffic calming measures. I think, yeah, I don't want to miss that point that was brought up several times. So.
All right, there's staff provided 3 options in the council action form. Actually, staff report, excuse me. Is there interest in any of those options or a modification of those options? I think a motion on the floor.
Staff, I have a question for staff again, I guess. If we do proceed with drafting an RFP, do you need more detail from us about our interest in seeing open space as a part of that RFP? Or
I think if there's I probably don't want to use motions to create the RFP, but if there's, a singular issue like that, which is important to define, if there's an interest of council to have that presented into the RFP, that'd be great to add that tonight.
Okay.
Otherwise, I probably am not looking for a lot of direction. I would rather bring back a comprehensive RFP and then you would edit out what you don't want.
Okay.
But adding the green space would not be a bad thing if that's what you're interested in.
It's more complex than that. When you have a developer take over the land and open space, you mean open space that everybody in the city could have access to. Now, you're talking about establishing a formal city park. That's a different kind of process through the Parks and Rec Commission. I think you want to get their input before you just establish a park. But when you say open space, developers don't always think that it's open to all the public. And I think these neighbors like to have access to it. So
yeah, I guess I meant open space and not an official city park. Yeah.
So you want to make sure that so we would retain ownership as an open space as it is today, just open, and not give that off to a developer as part of their development plan?
Well, couldn't they agree to
Have open space open for everybody?
Yeah.
We put it in the RFP. I think the number of houses we are looking at here, it's a hard number to carry large public investments or private space that's replacing a public investment. But we don't know until we have an RFP and we have someone respond with what they're willing to do.
Well, you have the ability to offer reduced land cost, obviously, which helps a builder, right? The incentive and reduced land costs. That's a good incentive for people.
Yeah. I guess the other option would be we maintain a sliver somehow or a chunk of it or something. But I don't know.
And size would be, what do you want to, how much do you want to retain as open space?
So I have a question, and I apologize if this sort of looks like we're sort of brainstorming, but that's sort of sometimes what we have to do. So I wonder if a possible trade-off would be if we take out some of the space for open space, then it makes this less viable for single-family detached houses, which would be probably more consistent with the neighbors. But if we went with attached townhomes, we could obtain more units in the space and have the green space as well. I wonder if that's something that we should explore. So at the end of the day, we're adding more housing units, but we're respecting the nature of this neighborhood. In a perfect world, we wouldn't be here. Like as I said in the beginning, this would have developed as the other lots, but we are where we are. And so I think this seems like an interesting area to pursue because we're getting both of our goals.
Are you talking, Tim, roughly of something like design concept 3? That's the one that has the attached, isn't it? With the.
Yeah.
With the.
Yeah, thanks for that,
Common
Gloria.
space. Well, I was thinking that the cottage vision is slightly different. I thought that what I was hearing was like open green
I'm
space.
wondering if we might have more of the development on the east end and then leave open that larger back end. So anyway, thinking about the area closer to the railroad, which I understand we may need to do something with, but instead of pushing everything back, having it further east, but to allow that back area to stay open.
Well, I think that what I'm hearing is from staff is that we're looking for some direction in terms of they can craft an RFP. If we can, I think instead of trying to figure out how it's going to be done, maybe to go ahead and just give them some general direction. And then they can come back and you can look at if this is what you want to do, and then look for the evaluative process of the responses of the RFP would be looking at how are they coming up and solving some of these challenges versus trying to say front or back or whatever, unless you want to be that specific. But I would encourage at this point in time to just give some general direction and then let staff take it from there, and then they'll come back and then we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, I agree, Mayor. I'd like to try this motion out and see if it has some traction. Maybe we could be amended. I'm going to move option 1, but that we design the RFP to prioritize attached housing, but also to maintain a sizable portion, and I'll leave it sort of general language like that intentionally, for open space.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion?
Just so you know, sizable is not much
Not a
direction for
number.
us.
So
How many acres are there now?
1.8.
1.8.
I mean, what's realistic? Just so everybody knows.
Again, an RFP needs to establish priorities. We cannot design this in an RFP or we will have no one respond to it. So I think
But you have a minimum size that you want for the.
we'll have to look at that.
No, do you have anything in your mind?
Well,
We don't want you to reject the RFP after we do it, so
yeah. So I'm not trying to run from this, but I'm not sure I can articulate from the dais what that size should be. So this is going to be a compromise. So the neighbors are going to give up some green space in exchange for having this project. I just want to make sure that it's a size that is viable. At the end of the day, if it's just a little swing set, nobody's going to be happy with that.
I understand that.
So
I'm asking.
Maybe we could ask staff to come up with.
We'll give you some options
Some
when we come
options,
back
yeah.
with the RFP. It won't be worded that way. I think we understand the intent.
We're going to have to be more specific.
The RFP will have some more definition to it. I think I understand the intent.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
Was there a second, Mayor?
Was-
There
Oh,
was a
I
second.
seconded.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else, Kelly?
Not on this item, no.
All right. All right, move on to item number 52. Request to initiate zoning text amendment for exception to minimum FAR and height along Main Street.
This item is a response to a referral that was presented to council a couple months back for Ames Silversmithing looking to, I think they already acquired the building and looking to expand their store on Main Street. In downtown service center zoning, which is DSC, we have two standards that are really designed to define building character. We do not have design guidelines per se about building materials, window percentages, things like that. What we have is a 2-story building requirement along with what's called a floor area ratio, which means that the area of building must be equal to the lot area. And that's called a 100% floor area ratio. And the way our downtown zoning standards are written, if you're doing an expansion, you must achieve compliance with that expansion. So if your building already exceeds those numbers, great, you can add on, you can do those things as you wish. If your building is not in compliance with those, any addition must bring the property into compliance. So with Ames Silversmithing, they already have a 1-story building. The property that they have acquired is also a 1-story building, and they believe it's impracticable to make 2-story buildings out of that if they are to demolish and rebuild an addition for that facility. So the request in front of you is to look at those two standards and consider allowing the use of a current exception process that we already have to be able to be applied to Main Street businesses. So a few years back, you have discussed this issue on a couple of different occasions. There's a couple of carve-outs for different types of situations. One of those is if a property was on the perimeter of downtown 6th Street, you could go to ZBA and get an exception to the design requirements if you could still meet the intent of the character requirements. So Ames Silversmithing is saying, we think we could make that case if you allowed us to apply for that type of permit. So you would not have to create the exception process. You would just have to delete the exclusion of Main Street properties from that process. And then they could apply to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, propose their project. The board will decide if it meets those criteria. Another option is, again, we've reviewed the standard many times. If the standard was just removed from the code, they could move forward with staff review of a site plan, and there would be no Zoning Board of Adjustment process. Those are probably the two practical solutions to their request. The other thing we discussed is you recently initiated the 20% rule. So that's going to be an allowance for alternative design measures related to numeric standards. As we discussed in here, their proposal probably does not quite meet 80% FAR. It's probably estimated in the mid 70s. So if you did nothing tonight, they could take advantage of this 20% rule. They would have to adjust their project to get up to that 20% standard as we understand it today. You're on track to see the first reading of that ordinance on June 11th. So it hopefully is adopted and effective by July as the third option here.
Kelly, what's the criteria that have to meet under the Zoning Board of Adjustment?
I think, did we place it in here? Paraphrasing, it requires at least a 0.5 FAR of a building. So half of the lot area must still have building on it. You cannot have parking be the primary feature at the front of the building, which would not happen on Main Street. And then the building design itself must still have Main Street character, which is defined more along the lines of orientation to the street for pedestrians, having windows along the street. So more design guideline based rather than just building form. So the ZBA would judge that.
And that'd be the easiest to do.
It's the same level of text amendment in any one of these. It's a one-line edit one way or another. There's no new standard being created. There's no new process being created. It's either using what we have or deleting something that we have.
And you say the young, well, they'll probably want to speak, or the representative, whether that's acceptable to them as an option.
I believe they're here to speak, yes.
Questions?
Kelly, it's been a while since we've had one of these projects before us, and it's just sort of abstract concept for me. And so could you explain for us maybe what are the implications of this? I want to make sure that we understand, are there intended or unintended consequences that we should consider as we think about these options?
I think it's always
going to see more development, less development. What kind of development?
It's a little unclear. So you've had, I think, 4 different requests related to this in the last 5 to 6 years. They're a little bit of one-off projects. No one is a brand new building. So that's what's different here is we haven't seen anybody build a brand new building that complies with the standards. We've had people modify structures or do additions. And again, if you already have a 2-story building, it's not as hard to comply. If you don't, it's tricky to comply with the 2-story building requirement. It's hard to add that second floor and get to the floor area sometimes. I think the intent when this was adopted in roughly the 2000s was, yes, it reflects Main Street character. You look down Main Street, you basically see 2 or 3-story buildings everywhere. It was also a density requirement for ensuring that we weren't building 1-story commercial development with surface parking lots. So once you kind of push the intensity up, you're trying to drive the developer to make a choice for a more intense development that's not parking based. And I think that's another reason why it's in the code. If you take it out, I think modifications to existing buildings are easier. I don't know that it materially changes a whole new development because we haven't seen one. I just don't know how people would look at that. If we delete it, I think we noted there, DSC could use some help in terms of actually articulating what our real priorities are instead of just 2-story buildings. That's one way to do it. But if you take that out, I think you need to define what you expect on Main Street as a storefront, how parking is accessed and things along those lines.
And have we received any kind of feedback or have we sought any feedback from downtown businesses on this?
We have not sought any feedback. There's no specific proposal yet.
And so would the process that we go through at some point solicit input from businesses in the Main Street corridor?
It can, it typically would not on a text amendment. We did do quite a bit of conversation with downtown stakeholders last summer. We had a report out in August of last year about different development concerns. This particular issue didn't come up directly. Obviously, they were very pro flexibility. We modified our tax abatement structure and some other elements at that time. It would not be hard to send out an email and to those people that participated previously, they were kind of active in that development conversation. Text amendments just typically don't have that for such a minor thing. Now, the exception itself does have a notice requirement. So if they did apply for that and go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, there's a 200-foot notice requirement. So essentially, half to a full block of downtown is going to have a chance to review the project and comment on whether they believe it meets the intent of those standards.
Okay, thanks.
So Kelly, I think I know what you're going to say when I ask you this. Is there a reason that we wouldn't simply say that the building that replaces the building that's demolished needs to be the same size or larger than what was there? As I understand it, they want to replace the one story with a one story.
Correct.
So there aren't that many one-story buildings on Main Street.
Correct.
And I know we want to try and get people to come into compliance and create a feeling, but is there a reason that we wouldn't simply carve out replacing like with like?
I mean, that can be the policy. I'm not sure exactly how we would write that. I guess you're having still the standard, but then there's a method to go down to where you were, is what you're saying. So we would expect new development.
If you're replacing,
it.
if you're replacing what was there with something of a similar,
So then the standard would be you just can't reduce the floor area ratio that is on a property. That would be that's how that would
Yeah.
get written.
okay. And what would the implication of that be for, I don't know, Main Street character or demolition standards or anything that we might?
We
be
have no
thinking
demo
about?
standards. Only if you demolish an historic building, you're not eligible for tax abatement.
Okay.
That's the only indirect demolition standard. I mean, it would lock in the character you have today, right? Like you said, there's a few one-story buildings. They could be replaced. No expectation of 2 stories. And a 2 or 3 story would not be able to be 1 story.
Other questions? All right, open up public comment. Anyone want to address council on this topic? Mike or Gary?
Good evening, all. I had Gary Youngberg, my wife and sons and I own Ames Silversmithing downtown. And I thank you for hearing me tonight. I hadn't expected to say anything tonight, but I could argue that Gloria's point of replacing a like structure would be a very simple solution to where we want to go. We opened in 1976. I think we bring tremendous beauty and value and strength to downtown. We're arguably maybe the longest business down there nowadays. In 2004, we expanded west, and a standard, I don't believe the standard that we're talking about today existed. We simply bought the property, added on a nice space, and everybody says, God, look how great that looks. That's what we want to do now. It's a very simple thing that we want to do. It will bring more for downtown. The fact that it's not going to be a 2-story, to me, has zero bearing on how downtown looks and how it works and so on. And that is just a very simple thing that we're trying to do here for ourselves and for downtown. I thank you. Any questions for me?
How do you feel about the other options, like going to ZBA?
Like what? I'm sorry.
Allowing for all buildings regardless of use to be eligible to apply for an exception approved through the ZBA. So going to the Zoning Board of Adjustment and making your case.
I think my wife served on the Story County Zoning Board of Adjustment, and people would come and say, this is what we think, and then the Zoning Board of Adjustment would simply make a determination. I think that's a very simple process, very straightforward. I think if presented with what we want to do, it would be a simple yes.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
So just what, that was the original request, was that option.
Okay.
Mike?
Hi, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mike Stott. I'm an architect here in Ames, retained by the Youngbergs to work on their project. I'm the one that actually wrote the request letter to the mayor and to the city council to consider this. And Kelly has done a wonderful job in summarizing the request, and so I'm not going to rehearse that again, yet to say that as we met with Kelly and staff to understand what some of the remedies might be to help out in this development process, it was my understanding that council had directed staff to try to be more developer friendly and try to help the process along a little bit more so that everything wasn't so onerous, or could be perceived as onerous in a development setting. And I just want to share with you that we were met with nothing but tremendous respect and tremendous, I think that they've done a wonderful job in considering our request and listening. And we sat in a kind of a work session per se in their office with Kelly and his staff, trying to figure out ways that would still maintain your standards, but allow us to have an option to apply for an exception. And I thought that was masterful in the way that Kelly has provided tonight is, I think, very eloquent as well. So I just wanted really to thank you for allowing us this process. Thank you,
Mike. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input.
As I think about the suggestion that I had, the one thing that I think maybe my suggestion works against is creating more opportunity for downtown housing. And if we require two-story buildings to replace one-story buildings, we create that opportunity for upper story apartments. But I don't see a reason not to go with option 2 because it allows people to make a case for needing to keep the one story. So I would move that we pursue option 2.
I'll second.
Which is allow for all building additions regardless of use to be eligible to apply for an exception approved by the ZBA.
Okay. Any closing comments? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Suggestions on timeline? What that might.
It'll probably be able to be at the next P&Z meeting to move forward. And that would be in June.
You're going to take this to P&Z first, you said?
All text amendments have to go to.
Thank you.
Right. So the two-step process from tonight, they can apply for a text amendment. It has to go to P&Z for their comment and recommendation. Then it'll return to you for adoption of an ordinance.
Okay.
In June, and in June of the council, you think?
That would be my belief. That's when it would happen.
And if council desires, they could potentially waive rules and have 3 readings on one night if there's no objection.
Yeah, that's up to the council at that time.
Right. Okay. All right. And I presume you'll coordinate that with.
Yep, we'll be in touch tomorrow.
All right, very good. All right, move on to item number 53.
Very quick, we usually don't talk about final plats because they're pretty routine overall. With this plat of Sunset Ridge North, there was a couple of unique elements that we had discussed in the report. We participated in the extension of the sewer for this project, and that's been completed for the extension from the east side of the site all the way to the west side. That helped open up the growth area into Boone. That was a big project for us to participate in. So some of the utilities are accepted with this project, the water and sewer, and we have easements to accept those as completed public improvements. The unique parts of this are the right-of-way has been extended all the way to the north property line for Wilder Avenue, even though it's not paved. So part of the public improvement agreement identifies that paving essentially in front of outlot XX and outlot YY is not complete at this time, even though we're accepting the right-of-way because of the water and sewer that is already there. Lot XX and lot YY are not yet buildable, so that makes sense that you haven't created a road on for lots that are not yet buildable lots. The other thing that the applicant has asked for is there was 2 conditions with the preliminary plat. They're asking for essentially deferral of those considerations to a later date and allow this first addition to be done. One of those was for a private sidewalk connection in outlot A to possibly be connected to a future city park. We do not have a design at this time, so we don't know if that's feasible or not. Staff is okay with delaying that at this time, and we'll look at that again in a future edition when we know more about the park. And the second one is to defer to staff approval of a street tree planting plan on the west side of Green Street. Is there any questions about the utilities or the deferred conditions?
Questions?
Kelly, we try hard to be consistent in handling these things. And it's true that they're always sort of a case-by-case basis, but you feel like the proposals here are consistent with the way we've handled similar type of requests?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a similar. It is a little atypical what we're doing, trying to match up what the developers completed with the phasing they're proposing. We as staff, including Public Works, thinks it's workable. We can accept those improvements as completed, which helps them remove financial security requirements. And we think we're protected with the easements and the right-of-way as is. So as I noted in the report, and our next edition, we'll have to talk about how the paving of Wilder occurs and again, how that sidewalk gets extended or not through that outlot. But at this point, we don't think we're missing anything.
Great, thanks.
Okay, has the applicant explained outlot A why there's like this gap between lots 24 and 25?
That has a detention facility in it. You just can't see it in this drawing.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right, open up public input. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Entertain a motion on resolution approving final plat.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. And entertain a motion on resolution accepting financial security for public improvements.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Let's take a short 5-minute break and then come back and then
I guess the best part.
anticipating it's going to be a very long conversation regarding the planning work division plan. So
How long?
All right, we'll move on to item number 54.
All right, we are at everyone's favorite item because these are all your projects and we get to work through how to prioritize these for the upcoming year. As we always start with the work plan, I try to keep you abreast of where we're at with different referrals or different projects you've already initiated. So in the beginning of the report, we identify a fairly long list of things that are in work, and then the attachment includes shaded areas by month of where we think those projects that have already been prioritized, where their next step is, or ultimately when their conclusion will occur. So you'll see we have a fair number of items kind of set up here for May and June, and a few that are going to extend through the summer. So for the most part, whatever we pick tonight, there wouldn't be any substantial progress until the middle to the end of the summer to really start those items. And as usual, we talk through quite a number of issues in relation to, are they development needs? Are they long-term policy needs of the city? Are they unique projects that need to get prioritized to reach council's goals over the next 2 years? Overall, we have put together a list of about 35 projects. Some of them are multi-step, but I don't break out each step for you other than to show that they have somewhat longer duration. A few of these have been on the list for quite some time. Like, for example, the link development has been a holdover for many years. It comes in fits and spurts, but it does take a little bit of time each time that comes in here in terms of that project, and it's connected to the reinvestment district. One thing I do need to note, which I had in this table, is the reinvestment district application has been in pending status, waiting for the link project to be completed or to be approved and to move forward. The state has notified us that that program is coming to an end at the end of this year. So we do need to have a final application approved by the board this fall. So there is, and the developer is aware of that. We've had some meetings recently about how to move forward on that site. But just to let you know that the reinvestment district update is something that has to happen this summer to be able to meet the IDA's expectations of that program. So that's something new for you that hasn't been on the work plan previously in that context anyways. Overall, quite a diverse set of issues we have, and that's not surprising. I think we have new interests that have come up in the last year from the Climate Action Plan. We still have many measures from Plan 2040 that have not yet been implemented. You would usually expect a comp plan to be implemented over a 3 to 5 year period. So we're about 2 years in. We've done a couple smaller things in terms of ADUs and duplexes and a few other items there. But there is still a substantial amount of implementation measures to really embody the policies of that plan. And you've also been working on a number of transportation planning projects through the Public Works Department, whether that's the Complete Streets policy, whether that's the walk and roll plan that you've seen the first draft of that's coming back for approval here later this summer. There's a lot of things that need to come out of those policies and those programs of Public Works to implement our infrastructure requirements, both from the planning side as well as what gets constructed with subdivisions. So as we look through this, there's that marrying up of the policy needs of the city with how we're going to guide development that fulfills many of the visions that we have in our policy documents and our other design requirements. So tonight, what is unique, which you have not had to grapple with before, is the concept of a very significant project of a zoning ordinance update. I think a few months ago, we were talking about flexibility in design standards, the number of referrals that the council gets, how many outstanding issues are there for the implementation of the comp plan, and the question was posed, is it time? My initial response is, I don't think so. But as we work through the winter on more and more issues, we came up with the AADC Housing Task Force letter. Just more and more things keep coming up that we're just not quite in line with expectations that this council has for development and for implementation of Plan 2040. So a zoning ordinance rewrite is a significant project. I don't believe it's going to be as lengthy or as involved as the comp plan. That would be the closest thing to doing this that some of you were involved in. But it is something you should expect at least an 18-month process to go through. I think our rewrite is not going to be as involved as the 2000 version. So Steve lived through a 3-year process of rewriting the zoning ordinance from 97 to 2000. The reason I don't think it's as heavy of a lift is that council has picked off some of the issues that would be of significance consequence to the single family neighborhoods. And that's most of, I'm not saying single family neighborhoods drive our development, but they are the #1 area use in the city. So when you impact a zoning regulation, there's a lot of things that go into that. So with our policies about duplexes and ADUs kind of already packaged up, a little bit more focus on where redirection areas and redevelopment is going to happen. We're not really going out for public input to revisit the neighborhoods. I think we can be more focused on implementing the Plan 2040 areas and working on the commercial development stuff. It's a little bit more focused than we were in 97, where we were really looking at how to redefine zoning districts, which neighborhoods are being protected, which neighborhoods get overlays, all of that stuff. I'm not expecting a lot of that. It could be the outcome of the process, but I don't think that's it. It still will take 18 months to kind of audit the project, audit the code, work through changes, talk to development community, talk to property owners, and have people have an opportunity for input. So tonight, because that is such a significant project, I have broken out the work plan into a first question of, is that actually a project you want to tackle? And if you were to do what I suggest in that first option, we would return in the fall with a workshop to discuss what are we really doing with this zoning ordinance update. I've said that one thing we might do is what's called a unified development code, which blends the subdivision with the zoning ordinance. We would do both updates anyways, but there's a blended version that might be a benefit to us to incorporate all of our expectations in one place rather than referring into two different development documents. But there's a style choice there. There's other style choices that go into it. And then what are our priorities in the update? Is it design requirements? Is it environmental design requirements? There's just a lot to talk through with you to make sure that we have a scope of work understood before we go out to the public and involve that. And at this time, I don't know that there would be a consultant or not. Part of it would depend on what the scope of work is that council actually wants to select. I'm comfortable with the drafting and the wording and all the things that kind of go into that kind of administrative elements of the zoning ordinance. I feel pretty comfortable with that. When we go towards a more illustrative zoning ordinance, which is the trend because it's a better communication tool, that's where when it gets into graphics, that's when it kind of leaves my staff's current skill set, and we probably need assistance to work through that. And that's kind of the trend right now, is to focus on online delivery of the information, as well as having a graphic rich explanation of development regulations. It helps the public understand it, helps the developers understand it. So that's kind of what we'll work through with you in the fall. So if you pick that and we come back for that workshop, unfortunately that narrows what we can really tackle beyond that zoning ordinance update in the next 18 months. So we suggested only a small number of projects could be added to the list. We did put a placeholder in, assuming that you would want to pick one neighborhood plan. So you'll notice at our next meeting, we're going to follow up on that December redirection area report where you asked us to give you some scope of work on priorities for neighborhood plans so that you could pick one. I put a placeholder in for that to be, assuming that council would want to start one of those plans later this year. If that's not the case, then obviously you can substitute at any point in time, you can substitute something in for what we've talked about. Now, if you don't start the zoning ordinance update, then that opens it back up to your typical process of up, six plus projects, depending on how complex they are and what we have as staffing resources. What I try to do, we've talked to this before, is I don't have one person that works on these. I work in the center and we work out to the planners and we try to fit into the development schedule time to complete the project. So one planner might work on a small project, another one might take on 2 long-term projects, and we kind of mix and match time and resources to get this done. That's why it ebbs and flows a little bit, because we've always been responsive to the development demands rather than just say, here's a straight commitment of staff. 2 are going to do this and 3 are going to do that. That is not how we operate right now. So we usually fit it in as we can go, and we work through the different projects that the council comes up with. I looked at this a little bit more after I put this together for you. I kind of looked at it as we have kind of 6 themes in here. So we have 35 projects. I kind of broke it out into 6 themes. We have 3 projects I would say are primarily related to transportation. We had 7 projects listed under what I would call placemaking or plans. We had 9 projects, which I would say are more development focused. So whether they're literally like the Link project or they're redoing zoning for one development project, we had 9 in that category. And then we had 12 in the zoning ordinance or subdivision standard category all by itself. And then we had 3 what I put into environmental, and then 3 I put into a housing category. So that was kind of the themes I picked up from the ones that are here. Of the ones that have been previously prioritized, zoning has the fewest priorities. So out of those 12, only 3 are currently prioritized. And most of those are related to the AEDC Housing Task Force letter. Same with this. So then it's kind of, there are no environmental referrals right now. There's no housing referrals right now. And the only transportation one is the obligation to do the land use modeling for the update, which you guys don't even see, but it's something that we have to put into our work plan. So right now it's pretty open on a lot of topics. Really, we're working through some of those development requirements and a little bit on the placemaking plans. So that'd be like the downtown plan. It would be working through the Harrison RFP and then the redirection area. So with that, I guess the questions on any of the projects. In the past, you have made motions to possibly delete items if they feel like they've aged out as a priority and they don't need to be on the list. We have deleted items in the past. Otherwise, we're looking to establish priorities, and my first suggestion is to decide on the zoning ordinance.
Would you be willing to share that on the screen for
I can.
us?
It might be a little small to read.
I'm
While
just
he's,
curious.
while he's doing that, I think council's always done a great job not micromanaging staff. And I was just thought,
We haven't always done a good job of that.
Well, okay.
Sometimes we do
All
a
right.
very good job of micromanaging
All
stuff,
right.
just for the record.
sorry, I was trying to give you some accolades. I was just thinking, if we could just talk for a few minutes, what are the priorities that council has on a broad brush stroke? I mean, we heard from, Dan Culhane about, how can we keep maybe 10% or more people that come in for jobs? We know that housing is an issue. I think that it's not just housing, in my opinion. I think there's amenities that people look for when they are looking for a place to live as well, too. But I appreciate, Kelly, you categorize these. I think it helps, bring to the point. But the point is what does council want to see accomplished in the community in the next 2, 3, 4 years? And what can, staff be doing? That's the old one. I noticed that. I just wrote it down.
I'm sorry.
The goals.
The goals, correct.
Mhm.
Right.
I'll
We
get
moved
that
on.
Distracting me. Sorry.
They are
Anyway,
correct.
I'm just thinking that if we look at trying to crack this nut a little differently in terms of what really are we, what does council want to see accomplished from a vision and and then how does that fit in to Kelly's, work plan? He can advise, well, if you do this, and maybe it is the zoning becomes a vehicle by which we can really streamline and help things go, move forward. I know you're working on the conservation overlay and looking at some of the things that may be impediments to freeing up land, which is in the city and it's ripe for development for housing lots as well too. But I know it's not your responsibility to initiate the development, but it's more or less what can we do to try and help spur it on and streamline that, if that is a priority. I think it is. We talked about that, quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I think that zoning ordinance overhaul would touch on a lot of our goals, right? So pretty much every header category there, it would affect because how things are zoned has an impact. It has an environmental impact. It has a social impact. It has a transportation impact. So I think the zoning ordinance overhaul touches on a lot of things. I guess my question to Kelly would be, if we say, no, we're not going to do the zoning ordinance overhaul right now, I mean, aren't we just kicking the can down the road anyway? Like, it seems to me that you're saying that it would be, we can't patch it up forever, right? So an overhaul at some point is going to be needed or required. And for me, we're always going to be busy, so it's not like if we kick it down the road, there'll be a time when you're looking for something to do in your department, like you're always going to be busy. And so I guess that's my question is.
I think what happens is because you have Plan 2040 needs implementation. I think if you don't pick the zoning ordinance soon, you need to pick projects every 12 months that hit Plan 2040. So you're picking off zoning issues one at a time instead of comprehensively. There's no way we're going to go 2 to 4 years without some kind of meaningful zoning changes. It's whether you're doing them all at one time or not.
I see.
That's how I see it. It's not an all or nothing. It's just we're going to do it one at a time.
So I like Ron's question. Let me ask it slightly differently. Imagine we didn't have a Plan 2040. How do you as a planner know, like, what are the tipping points to indicate that a current zoning ordinance isn't functioning well? So what are the yellow flags that are like, hey, you need to pay attention to this? And could you give us just some thoughts? Because that really is helpful as we think about a cost-benefit analysis. Then later on top of that, we have Plan 2040. But could you just speak to the issue just of the functionality from your perspective?
Yeah, in a vacuum, without having Plan 2040 shape what we want to do, it'd be the number of text amendments we're considering.
Mm-hmm.
Are we being responsive to the development community? Are neighborhoods unhappy with what's happening and you're actually going the other way and putting restrictions in instead of deleting them? I think the higher volume of those things, that's a clear indication that you're not on page with your council goals or with your adopted plans. Even beyond that, I mean, we see a lot of stuff at the Development Review Committee. Not everybody gets to you asking for a text amendment. They're usually fairly needy when they come to that stage. They would rather much work with staff through things than have to come to council. Well, we see people just like, I have to live with this choice because we wrote a standard 15 years ago that maybe doesn't fit in the market today, because we specified something very specific that was of interest 17 years ago, but we do it differently now if that wasn't there. So some of those things we see as staff, and that's mostly in the commercial zones for the most part. That's like in our Southeast Gateway overlay. All three of our old gateway overlays were very specific about those three entries into the city, whether it's South Dakota, Dayton, or East 13th Street. There's just things there that were written because of a project in 2005. The mall is an easy example, but the other ones have those things too. So I think you just kind of see through the eyes of what are other people building in other towns. Are we seeing that? Is there a reason we don't see that? Is it our codes? Is it just a different preference? We see a little bit of all of that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So even apart from 2040, there's probably a cost-benefit analysis to doing this anyway. But then to your point, with Plan 2040 and our goals, that's only just another reason why we want to create a structure in which that 2040 plan can develop.
That really pushes it over the top, right? Because now it's not just the smaller inconsistencies or preferences that you see. Plan 2040 shapes policy, and we're not implementing that policy yet. So that rewrite in 2000 was because we adopted the 1997 land use policy plan, and none of the zoning matched the policy plan. So that kicked off that 3-year process of rewriting the zoning ordinance to implement that plan. That's where I'm saying I don't think we have that big of a lift. There's still work to do, but that's kind of the thing. That's why we can limp along and pick off the priority projects if we really wanted to, or you just bite the bullet and you get it done and you're hoping that for 5 years you don't have any complaints and no text amendments and council meetings are only an hour long.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sign me up.
Kelly, I have a question about some of the items that are listed under the zoning ordinance update option.
Okay.
For example, number 10, the sign code. We have had that sitting out there for ages. Do we need to do that, or could that be replaced by something else? Or is it more valuable to do it while you're doing the whole zoning code update?
If we're doing the zoning code, I think you just got to do it. So we have, unfortunately, in the zone, we have our sign standards are split. Some of our zones have sign standards, and then we have a sign code that's citywide. That's not a good way to do it. So we need to just clean that up. There's some issues with recent court case decisions. We're probably not perfectly in line with some of those things. No one's complained or sued us, obviously, but we're probably not quite there. And then the split of standards. If I'm doing the whole code update, it's a lot easier. I'm already talking to commercial people about commercial standards. And by the way, we've changed the sign code. So the sign code is the classic one where you said, Kelly, I get it. We should update it. However, it doesn't seem to be as important as this thing I want to do today. It's the poster child for the work plan. It's been on the work plan for 5 years. Yeah. And we just haven't started it because there's always something more interesting to do.
My items have been in the parking lot for 10 years.
You have some other ones
but
that are longer.
I'm willing to hang on to those because they aren't causing any problems for people.
So the easy answer is I would struggle to tell you have to do the sign code, but it's easy to say if we're doing the zoning code update, absolutely deal with the sign code.
Mm-hmm. And what about what is the parkland dedication ordinance requirement?
So that's a Plan 2040 implementation measure. We lack a park dedication requirement in our subdivision ordinance. So no set aside of park space is defined within any code that we have.
Oh.
So it is on us as staff and as the council to negotiate with every rezoning application as a master plan if there's going to be a park dedication expected in new development. So with Plan 2040, we defined a little bit more of our land use pattern. The last one was more, here's a big yellow blob, development will be here. Now we have greenway shown, we have articulated our park proximity requirement. We have an acreage standard in Plan 2040 that talks about our goals for parkland to be created and the types of parks we want. So one of the implementation measures is to have a tool in our subdivision ordinance or in a unified development code that talks about that. And then you're not negotiating on every project.
Can you comment on, you say that if council initiates the zoning ordinance, you believe or staff believes one larger redirection area can be still prioritized with 1 to 2 larger projects over the next 18 months. So what kind of things would be sacrificed that you've heard are priorities for council that might get put on the back burner because of the time it's going to be required to do the zoning ordinance?
I'm trying to be conservative that it's 18 months. I'm sure there's time to do other small things. I just don't want tonight to say, sure, I'm going to roll out 12 things plus the zoning ordinance. I think when you look at some of the council goals, which are in the 30s, some of those are bigger items. The affordable housing strategy, when we did that report for you last June, that was tabled. It had a whole host of programs in it. It wasn't geared towards zoning so much as it was towards programs. That's a different kind of task to have. Some of the climate action plan ones, some of those are probably going to get picked off by city manager's office and some of the other things where we're not the lead, but you do have a few related to the climate action plan also that don't have a priority at this point in time. I think the redirection areas is a good example. You could pick to do 3 redirection areas instead of a zoning ordinance update. I could task out staff to do 3 separate neighborhood plans if that was our priority. So those are the kind of bigger picture ones that probably are on the table in lieu of a zoning ordinance update.
I can't read very well your purple column. Is number 27 the East 13th?
Yeah, 27 is
included in that, or is that separate?
27 is in that purple column, and that 27 is the request of the Elwell properties for the commercial zoning rewrite on East 13th Street.
Isn't 27 in the flesh tone one, the peach one?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. It's in the development one.
So it's not actually.
It's not zoning and subdivision because it's related specifically to one developer. So these are my.
We think that's a priority. One of them hopefully can fit in your plan either way.
Yeah. Correct. So yeah, and a lot of times you're stuck with 3 or 4 development requests. Since the AEDC letter is already in process, I'm not really listing that as a development request because that's already charted out as being accomplished. Your LWEL request is really your only pending development request. And if you remember, I know it's been a while. So back in January, they sent you a letter. Their goal was to clean up zoning in their eyes this year, so they had a marketable property for development next year, rather than I can't market this because I don't have a prospect because I'm struggling with how I'm going to meet the zoning, and I have to keep coming back and asking for things. So that zoning was specifically tailored to the regional mall. Development agreement is there. Really locks in a power center and a mall project. They would like to look at other opportunities. They're not trying to get out of design expectations. They're not trying to have problems with the marsh to the north. They're just trying to work through a normal commercial zoning process involving a master plan with the council, having some design expectations, but not be so tailored to a mall.
Well, when we negotiated that, remember, that's when the council didn't perceive going to the east. So it's a very onerous agreement. That's the original Bucky Wolf
The agreement, yeah.
agreement. And that needs to be refreshed. It's just,
so they struggle.
because now it's part of your plan. You want to facilitate it, not block it.
So one of the things that I asked Steve the other day when we had our managers meeting was whether something like item 31 and 32, which are related to our council goals, could be done in increments with, putting out some feelers as a start, but not focusing all our attention on building the partnerships, just letting people know we're interested in partnerships and finding out who else is out there that might be interested in partnering with us. Because when I look at the 31 and 32, you could spend a lot of time on that, but if you don't know who might be interested in the first place, it doesn't get started right away.
Right. So to implement that idea, you could articulate that is a single task, which is to identify or reach out and solicit interest, versus the commitment to I'm finding that interest and I'm going through with a project on a specific timeline. So yeah, you could break that kind up, at least get awareness. That's possible.
Because those two seem to me to at least get our goals underway, or some of the tasks associated with our goals underway, and not leave them because we don't have the time to focus on those projects.
That just needs clarification for the council. Those were the goals of the council. So what's the end product you wanted from the goal? Ryan, turn off your phone, please.
Somebody's
I
listening.
hope that wasn't me. I adjusted my microphone.
No, it was the owl.
Oh, you're good. Owl.
With regard to my parking lot items that I continually support, 19 and 20, I am happy to have us leave them in the parking lot till a future date if they do not fit with the Plan 2040 zoning implementation. On the other hand, one of them does relate to sustainability, and I think they're both listed under the zoning and subdivision purple category. But I don't know whether those are, again, things that are more easily dealt with while you're working on the zoning code. I am not wedded to seeing them move out of the parking lot, but I would like to leave them on the work plan document.
I mean, my recollection of them, 19 is clarifying criteria. The last time the council saw a demo permit, you struggled with what some of the intent was. That's probably a zoning code update thing. That's something you probably don't do a ton of outreach on. The other one was more of an evaluation tool to judge the merit in regards to sustainability, not the financial or the hardship criteria. That one probably doesn't fit directly in a zoning ordinance update. That's probably a separate kind of element of a study, and then you would decide if you wanted to make that a standard or not. So one of the two probably fits in.
And the one that's the criteria for hardship elements, is that a time-intensive item, or is that a?
It all depends on how many people I need to go talk to, right? So I mean, honestly, it's 2 words at a zoning ordinance, but is it 2 words through 4 public meetings with the sorority and fraternity owners about what the demolition criteria are, and they're going to come back and say, well, why do we have any demolition criteria? Like that's the kind of thing that just mushrooms up, even though it's a small number of sentences in the zoning ordinance.
So let's kind of get some things on the table here. What is the feeling regarding the zoning ordinance rewrite? Because that is really something that council wants to see move forward. That needs to be given to Kelly, and then you got to basically decide what are some of what other projects need to be focused on. And again, I'm just going to read what are the big picture items. We know that the legislature is trying to continue to constrict us from a revenue standpoint. So commercial development could potentially produce additional property tax revenue, which would help us from the general fund standpoint. I'm looking at it from a cash flow situation. We've talked about housing ad nauseum in terms of just how we need to do that. That seems to be a big factor. We've already got the downtown Ames, the plan partnership with Ames Main Street. That's already going on. We've already committed to that. So I think the point is that through natural quote selection or attrition, if I'm just going with what you're saying, Kelly, is that you can pick, if you pick this, you get a few more, and then that's it. And then that just basically allows us to kind of, move on. But again, I'm just trying to say, what are the big goals that we're trying to accomplish? You think that Ames needs and that the community is looking forward, looking to us to lead on. And then I think that helps with your selection of some of the major, products or projects.
Are you looking for a motion, Mayor?
Yeah, I think I think we've talked about this enough in terms of let's take it, first of all, on the zoning ordinance rewrite, is there a motion regarding that?
I would move that we pursue the zoning ordinance rewrites as recommended by staff.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, now.
You get 3 more choices, right?
So I would move that the Elwell project would be one of the 3 projects we prioritize.
Number 27 looks like, is that correct?
Yes.
Second.
East
All right, moved and seconded.
So I think this was recommended by staff, and it makes sense as one of the projects we should prioritize.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Kelly, what are we down to?
So
Door number 2 and door number 3?
I built in a redirection area. So if you want to keep that, I guess a motion to keep a slot for a redirection area, and then at your next meeting, you'll pick the actual redirection area that you want to program.
We can't just say Kelly's favorite redirection area.
No, because you told me to come back with a list of 3 priorities so that you could pick.
Okay.
So is redirection area more important than doing something related to sustainability?
I was going to suggest 24 as one that
Which one's that?
I think we should prioritize, and that is the Climate Action Plan Incentive Program of Property Tax Abatement for Net Zero Passive Homes. I think this would tie well with our current tax abatement program that we're getting moving, and so I think it should be on the list for this next year.
Is that a motion?
Motion.
Yeah, I would move that we prioritize item 24.
Is
I
there
would
a second?
second that.
All right, discussion?
Kelly, could you speak just to help us think through that a little bit?
Yeah, that was when we created the citywide urban revitalization area, there was a separate motion to evaluate what kind of standard we could articulate to the development community, and then consider what the cost difference was to do that if possible, and then look at if there would be an alternative incentive package beyond the ownership incentive package.
So you sweeten that package to help finance the extra cost of going net zero ready.
Yeah, so we'd have to pick a standard and then make sure we know how to administer that, and then ideally we'd have some kind of cost difference. I don't know if we'll be able to get to that, but some idea of the cost difference, which would justify the incentive to promote that.
I think there's going to be a pretty substantial price tag to this. But so I think it's worthwhile to explore this because I think it'll give us some numbers.
Right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So Kelly, you have down yellow, call it yellow lines on number 1, number 3, you've got number 11, you got number
Yeah,
13.
anything with yellow on it is already in the plan.
So those are already,
Those are that 10 pre-committed projects already.
so those are already factored in, so we don't have to worry
Yep.
about those being
They're not
included
going to
or
be
protected.
correct. Those are already programmed. And then the next one, so from your direction tonight, like for example, you had Harrison, I had listed as next step being tonight, which is a yes or no to move forward. You said to move forward that RFP. I said we'd try to do that in June. Preparing the RFP is not a big item. I mean, it's something we have to do in the next amount of time. I don't know what it's going to be after that. That's the problem with Harrison, is I just don't know what goes into the development review process in terms of selecting the developer. Once we have one, it's just a subdivision. It's just a rezoning. It's current planning. So there's a little bit of commitment on Harrison over the next few months to try and make that, but it's not one I'm saying you have to displace another selection with. It just needs to move into the yellow and keep going.
So can I ask you, so may I suggest that if you'd go back and take what you've got so far, evaluate where you're at, and if you say, I got one more, we can get one more project, then council can pick that up and you can maybe make some suggestions on what they might be versus throwing additional ones in.
I can do that.
Did we get 3?
Right now, we have Elwell zoning update and the net zero incentive.
So we have one more.
No one reacted to whether a redirection area should be pre-programmed or not.
Okay.
I'm more interested in trying to start number 30 or number 31, just to get them underway.
Which one's that?
Those are the partnering feelers.
I can speak on that a little bit. With partnering with the design school, I can put feelers out with our design senators at student government, and I can also speak at faculty senate about that. I probably would need a little bit of help with what I would say and what I'd talk to them about for pitching this project to them, but I think that's something that I could definitely work on with you guys and get that rolling once Senate gets back in session at school.
And Emily, were you thinking of, that would be
31.
31?
Yeah.
Kelly, can you articulate when you talk about redirection areas, again, refresh my memory at least, what do you mean by that?
So they were I want to say there were 7 of them identified in Plan 2040. So there was an area west of campus around Campus Avenue, Wood Street, kind of there. We had the Hunt Street area south of campus. You have the
Field area.
south of Lincoln mixed use area, which is 3rd Street, Kellogg, that area. You had a small one just outside of downtown, and a couple other ones sprinkled around the area. So the 3 that were most likely of interest were going to be west of campus, south of campus, or South Lincoln mixed use. And you asked us to put a scope of work together and like how large of a project are we really talking about?
I like pursuing one of the redirection areas as the 3rd goal myself.
I can just share with you without going into any detail that one of those maybe has some mutual interest with the university.
Oh, interesting.
So that could be a very intriguing.
Would that be in the report on those when we see that?
I don't know that it would be. I'll talk with Steve about that. So that would be related then to 32, right?
Oh.
32 is council goal task B1T3, explore and support creative housing development options with a public partner.
Oh, I was talking about the redirection areas.
Yeah. So what he's saying is it's possible one of the redirection areas is of interest to a public
To a
partner.
public partner.
Oh, I see.
So that obviously wouldn't exclude them from participating, but I don't know that we would know for sure that's a commitment or not.
Kelly, could you speak just for a second a little more on the link development?
That's already
This-
in progress.
I understand that, but it's in progress, but it's in hold, and if it takes a major directional change, I'm just trying to understand what that does for your team.
Well, right now I have it slotted as a time commitment. So if they showed up next week and just said, we can't do it, then that opens up time this summer to put something else in is really how it would go. So I've fully committed on this, that whatever we need to do to get a development agreement done, whatever I need to do to get the reinvestment district application done for the state, that's baked into this.
Okay. That's helpful. All right, thank you.
So is there a motion on the
Redirection area.
redirection? Thank you.
I would move that we prioritize one redirection area.
Second.
All right.
And is that with the assumption that, well, I guess I don't know how that fits with 32 at this point. The
I don't
mayor's
know that
saying
you know
maybe it
that
does.
because you haven't picked the redirection area to start with.
What's 32 now?
32 is partner with a public partner on housing development, or to look at a partnership. I'm not sure how it's worded exactly.
Was it housing development?
Yeah. So
Might be an option. We have to do some.
explore and support creative housing development options with a public partner, such as ISU, Ames Community School District, Gilbert, Story County.
I think regardless of whether it's with a public partner, I would be interested in doing a redirection area since we'll probably want to do more of these in the future. So.
Okay, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
So, Mayor, I would like to just, I don't know whether I need to make a motion about this, but I like the ideas that Emily put forward, and I would like to return to that after the summer, because we maybe can work out some way to incorporate your connections with our task.
So would you help? Can you amplify that? What do you mean by return to this again? Have further conversation in a council meeting, or just have her pick that up?
Well, it could be either of those things, but at this point, it's the end of the semester and we know that nothing's going to happen while
Until
everybody's gone.
August. Yeah.
So it seems like a point of discussion when school's back in session. And
So would you like that to be back on a council agenda in September or in August?
I would move that we put that on a council agenda for discussion in September.
Okay. For a second.
Second.
I think it's fine to partner with Iowa State students, but I want to be realistic in what we can expect. So this subject of affordable housing is a national catastrophe. And I just want to be realistic in what we can expect to get from students who are, there are a lot of bright minds that have spent careers trying to figure this out. So
I think I heard her say something about faculty senate as well, and other connections
Yeah,
perhaps within the design college. So
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to
And data.
start the conversation. It may not go anywhere, but that's all you're asking.
yeah, that's all I'm asking, because I don't want to see it just sitting there when we could be putting out feelers.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
So
You good?
I think we're good till we have our zoning ordinance workshop. I'll be talking to Brian.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 56. Is there a motion on resolution issuing a notice to bidders for the water pollution control facility nutrient reduction modification phase 1 project, setting June 26th as a bid due date and July 29th as date of public hearing and award?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
And it does say July 9th, not 29th.
I'm sorry, I meant, setting June 26th as a bid date and July 9th, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
thank you. Sorry.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, moving on to number 57, hearing on zoning text amendment for purpose of including rock climbing facilities. Eloise, any any comments?
No, I was just going to ask if you had any questions.
Any questions for Eloise on this? All right, declare the public hearing on the zoning text amendment for the purpose of including rock climbing facilities as miscellaneous uses within a general industrial zoning district by special use permit to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular item?
You've been a very patient.
3 hours and 22 minutes in, so there you go.
Yeah, sorry, it's a text amendment thing. I know we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah,
My name is
introduce
Brian.
yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Brian Dasher. I'm one of the applicants. The other applicant, his name is Keith. He's watching us now from DC. I'm really here to just introduce myself and answer any questions you might have.
All right.
So you waited this long. Can you just give us a quick overview? Like what do you envision this facility to be? Like just give us a
Sure.
sense.
Yeah. So it's going to be a bouldering facility. So if you're not familiar with that, it's not the really tall walls. It's walls generally 15 feet or shorter. It's the space we're looking at right now is on East 2nd Street. And it's about 8,100 square feet facility. We just think it's going to be a really good space for the community. Looking at it as a third space, it's something Keith and I are both passionate about and have worked hard and hope we can move it forward. So, yeah.
And we talked about this before, but the climbing facility, when the climbing facility in Kelly burned down, it was devastating to a lot of people who have that interest in.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not part of the university where you have access to the facilities at Iowa State, there's really nothing close by. So I think
That's correct. The closest thing would be in Des Moines.
Right.
So
So
it's
pretty
quite-
excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, so are we.
All right. Thanks for coming. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
staying. Anybody else? Declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion on first reading of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Eloise. All right, we're going to move on to item number 58, amendment to chapter 18.7A of municipal code, special penalty for game day parking to add event parking. Chief.
We should have thought of this before.
My mom's wondering where I am. It's getting late. So. Municipal Code Section 18.7A allows for a special penalty for game day parking and only for game day parking. So home Iowa State University football games. What we're looking at is we know about a number of special events that will be coming to the Ames area. Already we have a large stadium concert on May 25th. We expect there'll be more stadium concerts in the future. And with the development of Sci-Town, we also expect there'll be other special events that come to that area. We believe that those types of events will have a similar impact on the neighborhoods around the stadium and around where Sci-Town will be as a football game does, or a home football game. And so we're asking that we add language to that code section to give you the ability by resolution to adopt other days that may have a special penalty. So again, you would control which days you're interested in putting that special penalty on. The fix for the signs, we have metal signs in that area. We've already kind of looked into what it would take to fix that. Just replacing all the metal signs would be very, very expensive. But they do make some stickers that would go over those signs that would change some of the language to make it clear to people what was happening. And the cost of that is under $5,000 for the 466 signs that we have in that area for the special penalty. And that seems to be a pretty reasonable way to fix the issue. And then over time, as the sign needed to be replaced, we would just replace it with a full metal sign. And I take any questions if I can answer them. I would point out probably nothing we do is going to help us on May 25th this year because it's going to take a while to order stickers, get those all put up. But
May
I-
25th is the outdoor stadium.
Yeah, the outdoor stadium concert. So we would be looking at trying to get the work done over the summertime. And then when other special events come up, then that might be available.
So
Questions?
just philosophically, and I was supportive of the football ones because everybody knows it's football and then there's going to be these enhanced penalties. If we layer on top of that additional events, is there any risk of creating confusion for the public? Okay, is it special or is it not so special?
Yeah.
And so could you just sort of speak to that in general?
That's a good question. So if by resolution you decided to add days to the special penalty, one thing that we would do is we would definitely advertise over social media, other media, and we would put up the portable signs in those areas like we do for football game days, just explaining that special penalty applies during this event. So we would do our best to try and get that word out, not only in advance with some media, but also during the event with those portable message signs.
And how do we know when an event is sufficiently impactful that it needs to have this? Like, what's the benchmark for this?
That's probably tough to define. We know that the stadium concert that's coming in 2 weeks, I think, they're expecting about 52,000 inside the stadium. And they also expect that there'll be some tailgating like a football game. So I think that was probably a pretty easy one to say it has a similar impact as a home football game. Other ones we'd probably have to evaluate as they come up based on the event and the numbers expected. I don't think every single special event that happens necessarily would cause us to look at adding that day. There may be some smaller events where it probably doesn't make sense, but we don't really have the experience with Sci-Town to know what kind of events might be there and what the draw could be. So it'll be a little trial and error, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we approach this and see how it works. But I think we should just keep that on the radar screen, that there's an element of trial and error with this. And I'm still a little bit fuzzy on the criteria for this. And so we'll sort of play this as it comes, I guess.
I think you already mentioned it, but you also partnered with the, on game days, the Iowa State send out notices as well too, didn't they? In terms of just saying, hey, there's increased fines. And so that was your point in terms of special events and other things, letting the promoters know that will be the case. And
definitely in their communication during football, that's one of the things that's communicated is where to park legally and then the potential fines for parking illegally.
all right, any other questions? All right, I'll open up public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic tonight? Seeing none, close public input and entertain a motion on first reading of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 59, entertain motion on second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 28 of the Municipal Code, establishing geothermal services and rules and charges therefore.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, entertain motion on second reading and on amending Chapter 5 and Chapter 22 of the Ames Municipal Code regarding missing infrastructure requirements.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And entertain motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4526, Chapter 28 of the Municipal Code, Section 28.3043, to increase sanitary sewer rates by 7% for bills due on or after July 1st, 2024.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And entertain motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4527 on appointment criteria for boards and commissions.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, moving on, disposition of communications to council. We have quite a few. I'll go through the list. The first two, we had emails from Ames residents regarding site town development and the staff report. So those were just for information. Item number 3, email from Dr. Lawson, Ames Community School District Superintendent, dated March 25th regarding an invoice for municipal pool demolition. Do you have any comments on that, Steve?
I think you should ask for a memo to clarify what's being asked and justification and what our contract currently says.
I'll move for a memo.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Next is email from Cynthia Hicks, AIPCA President, April 22nd, regarding scholarships for middle school delegation to Koshu, Japan.
I think that's self-explanatory, so you have to decide whether to put it on an agenda and just vote for it or not, right? I don't think I need to give you a memo on it.
Have we, I don't remember doing this in the past. Have we supported scholarships like this?
No, and it was something that came up when we were talking with, when we had the Japanese contingent here in October, and they were touring through the schools, and we had a conversation with some of the individuals on the AIPCA board that there may be some students who are unable to afford going over, but it'd be an opportunity of a lifetime for them. And so this is for people who are under-resourced and maybe underrepresented, gives them a chance to go over. But they wouldn't be able to go otherwise, so.
There are lots of areas where we might create scholarships for people. I mean, I think this isn't a precedent. I mean, I want to do things to support our schools. But if we're going to start putting that kind of money in, then I want to think about the cost benefit analysis. So I'm actually not supportive of this, just sort of in isolation. I don't know.
I would move we put this on an agenda so we can actually discuss it.
Second.
But so you think that there's enough merit to the idea?
I'm not going to discuss it now. I don't think we should be discussing it. I think that it needs to go on the agenda in order for us to have that discussion.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried.
Highland Avenue. I would move we put this on a future agenda.
Second.
So I apologize, I thought I'd read this. Is there something that is a next step with this one?
Yeah, so remember there was some concern about safety, and we were going to work on Highland and just redo the project as is. There's some suggestion that we should, for safety, we should move from an on-street bike path to a shared use path. It gives us enough time, if you give us direction, to ask the design engineers to change that design. We'll have to explain if you want to do it or not. We're going to try to find out if there's any cost. It might be cost savings, actually, because we're going to probably go down to 3 lanes, and then we'll have room for the shared use path. We'll have all that available for you in the memo.
So,
but time's of the essence if you want us to change the design.
but so staff had already designed this with safety in mind. Is the staff asking this to be?
No, this was, remember this, I think Grant also
Yeah.
came and asked us, and this is a response to his, and they're saying a separate bike path, if you want to change from what it is now.
Shared use path.
Shared use path, excuse me, would be a safe alternative.
They actually say better suited option.
Right.
So
For safety.
I'm not going to ask for this as part of the memo, but I would be interested in how we decided to
Yep, that'll-
replace like with like instead of doing an investigation on
That'll be in there.
bicycle and pedestrian facilities and how to improve them as
Yeah.
part of this.
Why did we, Grace, included there, why did we do it in the first place?
Yep.
Why were they satisfied with an on-street bike path? Now they're changing.
So apologize. So is staff wanting this to come back, or they don't have opinion? I'm trying to understand this.
We responded to that's our response to the citizen request. I'm just telling you, if you want to change it, there's time to change the design. We're not recommending, we didn't recommend the change.
That's the point I'm trying to understand. So
Yeah.
staff's not recommending.
This was a response.
They didn't recommend not doing it either, though.
Yeah.
It says they feel a shared use path is a significantly better suited option. So we're going to have them talk to us about that.
We just have to get some data. Is it cheaper? What's the extra cost? All this kind of stuff. We don't know yet.
What was the motion, please?
Mhm.
Motion was just to move to place the item on paper. The original motion that was made.
Okay, thank you. Everyone understand the agenda, the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. All right. We have Mark and Carla Reynolds, Dotson Drive traffic concern. Is there interest for a memo on that, or?
I would move that we receive a staff memo to see what that area has been like.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item number 7, email from Bob Johnson, residential energy audit concern. Something we can just refer to staff.
Yeah, I think Don's speaking with the individual now and explaining what happened. We
So-
lost our auditor. We're trying to get a new one.
So staff can just go ahead and address it
I
directly.
think you
when
ask
they
the
have it.
director of electric services will respond to the individual directly.
Is that acceptable to council to just let staff take care of it? Thank you. Number 8 is email from Steve Martin regarding costs of downtown parking.
I think Tim had a good response to it, and I tried to explain the difference in the two philosophies. I don't know what you want to do.
I guess I was wondering, do you want this council just saying a thank you that was considered by council, but there's no action to be taken at this time?
I would move that we respond that, yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Email from Belinda Ellsworth regarding Washington Avenue and South 4th Street intersection concerns.
This is the
bus.
It's
us
the
again,
bus.
so.
But it's also the grass.
Right. It's
Oh,
also
we can
the
take care of
grass.
this, excuse me.
Yeah. It's,
Not the grass, the
Well-
the equipment, I mean
Grass length.
yeah.
that's,
There are two other there.
So
That's a native species.
Oh, so what is the, that's privately owned property, correct?
Mhm.
And when there is
So-
no ordinance in terms of length of grass,
yeah, I don't know if it violates our.
Yeah, there is. We
There
said
is.
there.
We voted on that.
12 inches if it's a turf grass species.
We can look into it.
I
Just
would
refer to
move-
us.
I thought,
I would move that we respond to Belinda and tell her that her concerns are best addressed by inspections.
Well, I can have the inspector look into
Or we just tell her that, though, that
Oh,
the concerns she brought up are things that inspections typically would deal with. The grass length and the stuff on
the
the,
material outside.
yeah,
the house.
outside the
Yes.
bus, yeah.
But if they're, as long as they're not noxious weeds, then there's no height limit.
No, turf grass species were limited to 12 inches.
Mhm.
But I apologize. So she's saying it is prone to noxious weeds.
Oh.
So this is an area of,
Noxious weeds are governed by the state.
that's my point is, if they're noxious weeds, then we have regulatory
Mhm.
authority. If they're just weeds, then we said as a council that there is no height limit.
No, but
It's
she's
turf
talking
grass
about the
and the-
grass and the height of the grass and the fact that people are sleeping in the
We'll
grass.
just
okay,
turn it over to
We'll,
us.
we'll refer it to staff. Is that okay?
okay, a motion to get, just refer to staff to address.
Second.
To enforce what we can.
I can't make the motion.
There, with respect to just the grass or is the
Here's-
bus also an element of this response?
The stuff on the street that belongs to the bus is part of that, yes. The plant potters or whatever.
Not the
that's-
movement of the bus or the parking of the bus, but the material they're depositing on the right of way is not legal, I believe. Right? As long as the bus is moved, it could stay there, and it doesn't take much to move.
All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Item 10, email from James Roach regarding permitted mowing hours.
Wasn't,
I would move we take no action on this item.
Okay.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And the last, and this is, I failed to refer this to, or send this to the city clerk because it came individually to each one of you. And that was a email from Marie Mancuso regarding the, you all got a copy of it regarding the pillar on, this is
oh, yeah.
on May 5th, I'm sorry, May 9th at oh gosh, Martin
Martin
pillar.
family.
Right.
Mhm.
And I'm just suggesting that maybe this could be referred to Justin Clausen to look at if it could be, for example, if an alternate were written into the, Ryan, is the proposal already out or not? Do you know?
Don't know for certain. I don't believe it is. I don't know.
She's interested in the whole pier being removed.
Right.
Mhm.
And if you got an alternate price to have what it would cost to cut that off and they can come and remove it, then council can decide if they want to pay for that or ask someone else to pay for it because she said that the Martin, Iowa State was interested in it.
I would move that we get a memo from staff on it.
All right.
Is that what we need?
From Justin Clausen.
Yeah, well,
I don't know what you want.
from whoever
think
it
I've
is
seen the
that's
letter.
working on this.
Yeah, I'll
Justin?
send it to
I
you.
mean, I think we could even,
You'll send it to Justin.
It just came to each of us individually. It wasn't to city council and mayor, and that's why it didn't get sent into the other broader spectrum. Memo from staff. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed?
Copy Brian on that too, will you? Copy Brian on that one. The pillar, he's the pillars are.
All right. Reports from government body. Any report from ACBB today?
We have not met since the last meeting.
Thank you.
I will forward, though, there's a May Innovation Lunch Club meeting, and the
Yes.
Chamber and Economic Development Commission will be part of that. So, yeah. More to come, May 24th.
Okay. Story County Emergency Management this agency will not be meeting now until a couple more months. Transit.
We have not met since our last
Okay.
meeting.
All right.
I got sworn in for
Yes,
that.
I was going to say Emily is on transit. now.
Oh,
Yeah, I got sworn
that's right.
in.
Are you still a student too? You're on transit, you're on city council, you got student government. You're a busy person.
I do my best.
All right. All right, council comments. Emily.
So quick shout out to my mom. She came to our city council meeting tonight. Hi, Mom.
and
then
why don't you tell her like how far away she came to see
she
this?
came from Burnsville, Minnesota.
Oh my God.
Which
Like we can't even get our people in Ames to come to our city council meetings. You just come every week, every council meeting now?
That probably won't happen. She's a busy lady also. My other comments are, I got some student input. They were excited about the new pickleball courts. So I've had multiple people come to me with that. I'm working on an interactive calendar to get to student government to share around with City of Ames events so that we can kind of bridge that gap between the university students and the city so that they will interact more with the community of Ames and kind of get down to Main Street and stuff to do all that. But that's all I've got.
Thank you. And I just want to commend the president and vice president of student government. They reached out, we met. Apparently you had a change of plans. You were planning on being in Ames for the
Yeah.
summer, and all of a sudden that didn't materialize, and now you're
Yeah.
going to be up in Minnesota, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
So she's interested in participating, but electronically versus driving back and forth for every council meeting. So that'll be set up by the city clerk.
Okay.
And that'd be a huge commitment for a for each meeting, unless you wanted to come down. You're welcome to, join us.
I'll see which ones that I can come down to. I would prefer to be here rather
Yeah.
than online, but it's not feasible for
Mhm.
the entire summer.
Yeah, and we understand that things do come up, and we appreciate your commitment. But I just want council to know that if she's owling, that's I think that's certainly a way to do a workaround to help you participate. So, all right, Gloria.
Oh, we were discussing traffic calming on Hyde, and I would like to get a memo from Damien regarding what the most recent traffic study has been and where we stand on that at this point before we move to do anything, unless someone wants to make a different motion.
Was there a second?
We want that in that same memo we had before then, maybe.
I had second.
He did do a study within the last year, I think. So could it just be more or less just forwarding the memo that he did? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay.
I was gonna say, we could all just search through our email inboxes.
See, I was looking
No,
and I
we can't
didn't
find it.
find
see,
it.
I don't think it's as recent as that. I think it may be 2
All right,
years.
so the motion
but-
is made just to get
I think-
the most recent memo sent to us then.
Mhm.
Okay, so the two that I found was 190th Street and Hyde, which is way out, and then Bloomington and Hyde, the traffic light there.
Oh.
So I don't know that there's actually been a traffic calming or speed study done on that stretch in a while.
Yeah, I know there has been one, but it's,
So what are you asking for again?
I would like Damien to find whatever studies have been done and send them to us
But Hyde is, big. Do you mean
on
Hyde?
Hyde.
Not in a certain intersection?
Bloomington to 190th.
Yeah, is that what you want, moving to 190th, that area?
Yes,
You're looking for specific areas on
The
that.
word hide.
yes, Hyde from Bloomington to 190th.
Second.
It's late.
All right.
Is that
Although I
specific
think
enough?
you already said.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Anything else?
No.
Tim?
So I just want to commend the pickleball community. That ribbon cutting was one of the largest ribbon cuttings I have ever been to. Like, I couldn't believe the turnout. It was amazing. So congratulations to the pickleball community. You got a nice facility. That's all I have tonight.
Oh, you don't want to talk about an event that's.
Oh, yes.
Come on, you're the chairman.
It's late. It's late. Well, are we going to have a meeting before Memorial Day?
No.
Mm-mm.
Oh, wow. I lost track of this. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
tee up.
go ahead.
So real quickly, for all the thousands of people that are watching, one of our best civic holidays in Ames is Memorial Day. And I love this day. And we have a parade that starts at 10:30 at the City Hall. It goes to the Municipal Cemetery. We'll have a speaker there. It's a great event. Everyone needs to check out the flags at the City Cemetery. There are hundreds of flags lining the street. It's really a moving scene and a great event. So please come out.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we're going to also, who's going to talk about what's coming up this Saturday?
Well, I'll mention it. There's no
All
one
right.
else, but you go
All
ahead.
right.
Go ahead.
Go
No,
ahead.
You teed it up.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
I was gonna say I'm excited for Saturday.
All right,
It's
go ahead.
our mayor council bike ride. We'll start here at City Hall in the west parking lot
What time?
at 9 a.m.
There you go.
And it's a family-friendly 12-mile route around Ames with a bunch of different stops. So I'm excited for that and hope to see you there.
Good. Anything else?
Nope.
I wanted to remind everyone that if you are interested in giving input about our website remake, to go to cityofames.org and click on in the spotlight. It says help improve our website. And it's a short survey, takes about 10 minutes, and we need your input. That's it.
Nothing for me tonight.
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Movie adjourned.
For a second. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi.